The Kyuubi attack had been devastating, as one might suspect. The lives lost that day were immeasurable, and the structural damage done to the village had left them vulnerable and several without homes. The tensions it caused politically nearly tore Konoha apart at its seams. Losing their fourth Hokage had taken a toll on them. Such a tragedy was not one they easily recovered from. The Yellow Flash of Konoha was a war hero revered across the nations and loved by his village. The news of his and his wife's death brought great mourning to all who'd looked up to him. He'd given everything to the Leaf Village, including his life in the end. He was a respectable Kage, a true hero. One issue that was severely overlooked was the lack of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki's bodies at the end of it all. Last anyone had seen of either of them, they'd both had a gaping hole through their middles, and Minato had been performing the Reaper death seal. When no one could find their remains, they hadn't been surprised. They'd taken what little remained of their fourth Hokage's robe and gotten closure as best they could, pulling Kushina's headband from her home and placing that alongside it. They were a little too concerned about their decimated village to try and figure out the exact way the bodies of their beloved leader and his wife had been destroyed. Perhaps it was a side effect of the seal or the Kyuubi's overwhelming chakra. It hadn't even crossed their minds that Minato could be alive. But he apparently was, because the guy woke up alone in the woods, nearly 6 years after said Nine-Tails attack, completely unscathed, confused, and sad. His last memory was of Naruto. He was so tiny, wailing so loudly as the nine-tailed fox was sealed in him. Minato had been ready to seal the other half in himself when his world went blank. The last thing he heard was Kushina cursing and beginning the very hand signs he'd been prepared to do himself. His heart dropped when he realized that probably meant she'd done what he'd been planning to. His head weakly turned, searching for signs of anything, really. He very clearly recognized this location as the place he'd teleported the nine-tailed demon to, but the destruction that had been wrought was missing. Green grass spread where there should have been scorch marks, and fallen trees were either cleared or overgrown. The movement of his head made it spin. Nausea lit up in his stomach like a warning. Something wasn't right. Minato knew this, but he couldn't find the energy to inspect it too much further at the moment. He simply laid there and watched the clouds drift by lazily, the grief of undoubtedly losing his wife bubbling over into tears that forced their way out of his eyes. He'd known the danger of losing her was strong going in. They'd both sat down and talked about it beforehand several times, but this was something Kushina wanted to do more than anything. To be a mother, even if it was just for a second. The raw image of her weakly smiling at their son made his heart ache so badly he had to wonder if he was dying. He could almost hear her shrieking at him to get up and go find their son. He'd been so absolutely little, and Minato hated himself for what he'd had to do. With nowhere else to seal the Kyuubi, he'd placed that awful burden upon his son. What kind of father was he? Naruto had been helpless, so tiny and warm and scared. Minato could almost imagine the infant's weight in his arms when he thought about it hard enough. The first moments of his life had been so stressful and full of terror. Minato's heart thundered when he thought about all that could have happened to his son. How long had it been? Had the masked man gotten to him? Was he okay? Minato hoped Naruto would forgive him for what he'd done, one day. The question swirling through his head prompted him to sit up. There was no pain from it like he'd expected there should have been. He rubbed at his eyes, feeling endlessly exhausted and like he was about to tip over. His heart felt heavy. He had to get up. He had to go find Naruto. How long had it been? His injuries were gone. While his cloak was missing, he still bore the attire he'd had on under it. It was unscathed, making him wonder if everything had been some sort of dream. It was an idea he entertained only briefly. No genjutsu could ever be that vivid. The pain he'd felt had been too real, and the gravity of the Kyuubi's chakra signature wasn't something that could be successfully faked. This was something he knew for sure. He took a deep breath. His thoughts weren't in order. He knew this, but he couldn't seem to fix it. He felt he was zoning out, or on the verge of losing consciousness, perhaps. A small part of him wanted to lay back down and never move again, but he couldn't bring himself to, no matter how sick and off-kilter he felt. Naruto. He had to get up for Naruto. He needed someone to take care of him, and Kakashi was still so young. That wasn't a responsibility he wanted his student to have. What if Minato had messed the seal up? He had to go and make sure Naruto was okay. He could feel panic swelling in him as the gravity set in. The reality that his newborn son, with his shock of blonde hair and whiskered cheeks, was missing. That Minato had no idea whether he was dead or alive, safe or in danger. His heart leapt into his throat. He could mourn Kushina later, grieve for her, and the sacrifices she'd been forced to make. She'd never forgive him if he let anything else happen to their son. He'd never forgive himself. He got up on wobbly legs that felt like sticks of jello. He steadied himself, head turning slowly about as he tried not to dizzy himself. He couldn't sense a single chakra signature. That was both a good and bad thing. Where was Naruto? He wondered if the village was okay. They had to assume he was dead. He thought so too when he first opened his eyes. There was always a chance he still was, but he didn't feel particularly like he had. Not that he really knew what being dead felt like. He doubted it was like this. Moving was agony, and a heavy haze kept attempting to descend over his mind and incapacitate him. It felt an awful lot like chakra exhaustion, but different at the same time. Minato wasn't in his right mind, no, but he couldn't let that stop him. He flexed his fingers, one hand snaking into the kunai pouch strapped dutifully around his leg. Muscle memory guided him to one of his legendary three-pronged kunai. He drew it out with a slow breath, his arm coming up to wipe at his eyes again. The kunai brought him a sense of comfort, allowing himself to steel himself. He pulled the inner hawkage out of himself and set his face in stone, doing his best to push back the exhaustion nipping at his heels. He had to get to the village. He could pass out, but not until he knew Naruto was safe. He had to stay calm. If he was alive, there was a good chance Naruto was too. He had to confirm for himself. Minato's mind struggled as he tried to figure out how this could have happened. The kunai flew from his hand unrestrained as he mulled, the familiar feeling of his Hurricane pulling him forward, lulling some of his panic. It was going to be fine. Naruto was okay, and Minato was going to go get him. He was going to be able to hold onto him and never let go, and shower him in all the love he'd missed out on in Minato's absence. How long had it been? It felt like no time had passed at all, but the overgrowth in the clearing he'd woken up in begged to differ. Had it been a month, too? Even more than that. The village wasn't far. The familiar sight of its gates only served to make him go faster. His presence chased his kunai dutifully, moving so fast that the world seemed slow around him. Minato knew he probably should have stopped at the gate. Let someone official send word that he was alive before going on his way, or confirm he wasn't an intruder. He couldn't quite bring himself to do so. He felt nearly dead on his feet, but Naruto was the only thing on his mind. The name repeated in his mind like a mantra. He allowed it to push him forward. If he stopped now, he wasn't sure he'd be able to use his Hurricane again, without passing out completely. Izumo jolted up when something seemingly yellow blurred past Konoha's gates, his head whipping in the direction of the electric haze. Kotsu turned a page in his book, not seeming to have noticed what had raced past. Izumo blinked a few times. Surely he had to have been seeing things correct. They'd been on the job only a month now, and nothing had really come up. He settled back in his seat for a moment with a frown, glancing back and forth between the road and the village's gates. There were no visible disturbances, nor any he could sense. The man had to blink and rub his eyes, wondering if he'd perhaps stayed up too late the night prior. Kotsu shot him a questioning look, and the bandana-wearing ninja decided it had to have been a trick of the light. Minato Namikaze zoomed into the village so fast he had half the place doing double takes. It took the blond man a good moment for his slowing brain to catch up and realize that this was not necessarily the Konoha he remembered. The fact settled in rather suddenly, hitting him hard enough to make him stop in his tracks in the middle of an unfamiliar back road. The destruction the Kyuubi had wrought was completely missing. The craters and rubble it had created were nowhere to be seen. Minato cluelessly spun around, his brows furrowed and a frown set deep on his face as he precariously teetered. This wasn't correct at all. How fast had they managed to rebuild? Businesses and buildings he didn't remember were placed sporadically between what was familiar. Even those places he knew and recognized didn't look quite right. Certain storefronts were the wrong color or had signs that looked newer, more updated. Minato's head hurt worse than it ever had before. His vision blurred. He had to have been gone longer than he thought. This wasn't something that could be accomplished in a week or two, or even a month for that matter. The realization made something cold settle in Minato's stomach. He did his very best to push the feeling away, gulping and shaking his head. It didn't matter how much time had passed so long as Naruto was safe. If anything, it was a good thing to see the village like this. It had clearly recovered itself well. That didn't change the fact that he couldn't find his son. He gnawed on the inside of his cheek, his chakra stretching out in search of any familiar sort of presence. The Kyuubi would be a plain marker. The man took a deep breath, pushing himself off of the fence he'd found himself leaning on. Minato began to walk, Naruto's name still repeating in his mind. He could only sense chakra so far. Deep down somewhere, he knew it would be best to go to the Hawkage Tower. The logical part of his brain told him in no uncertain terms that they would, undoubtedly, know his son's exact location. There was just an odd disconnect in his mind that prevented Minato from entirely realizing this. The man felt distinctly like he was walking through a cloud. A dream he couldn't wake up from, walking aimlessly towards something he desperately wanted, yet was unable to find. His heart thundered in his ears, drowning out the sounds of an older woman asking whether or not he was okay. He walked past her, focused on one thing. He ignored the way exhaustion was beginning to creep its way into his chest. He could not waver, not yet, not now. A few people did a double take when he stumbled by, their wide eyes following and darting between the dazed man's face and the one carved grandly on their proud mountainside. Minato was a ghost shuffling through the streets, eyes bouncing back and forth in a systematic manner as he scanned for someone who would help him find Naruto. The people here felt unfamiliar, and though he caught wisps of signatures he thought he might recognize, they didn't stick out as sorely familiar to the fourth Hawkage. His head pounded the longer he stayed upright, and he knew he had to collect himself if he was going to find his son before passing out. Konoha wasn't right. None of this was. Minato realized rather belatedly that he was probably not going to find an infant in the bustling streets, but rather tucked away somewhere protected, warm, and quiet. That was what Minato hoped, at least. He felt like crying. It was hard to breathe, and even harder to think. His vision blurred as his head turned. He brought a hand up to his forehead, closing his eyes and taking deep breaths. He heard someone trying to ask him something, someone else trying to figure out whether or not he was okay. Minato didn't respond, everything and nothing at all swirling around him. The man felt like he was drowning. But then it hit, and Minato's eyes flew back open. He'd recognize that chakra anywhere. It felt more suppressed here, the raging, angry inferno subdued under the strength of a powerful seal. It bubbled just beneath the surface, and Minato was sure he wouldn't have outright noticed it were he not looking so hard. He stood up a little straighter, his head held a little higher. His focus sharpened, gaze finding a small body being shoved out of a food stall by an older woman's foot. The child tumbled, and Minato was breathless. The world vanished around him. The pounding in his head wasn't so loud anymore, as everything else melted away. The child couldn't be more than 5 or 6, with hair a familiar shade of sunshine yellow and blue eyes that mirrored his own to an exact T. He could see Kushina in the curve of his nose and shape of his face. There was defiance alongside his fear, and confusion swelled in his chakra so clearly that Minato could almost see it tangibly. Minato took a small step towards the scene, his heart pounding. He would recognize this chakra signature anywhere, he was sure. He could still remember basking in it, feeling it grow and change in his wife's belly, and then finally being able to truly reach out and touch it for himself when Naruto was placed in his arms for the first time. He didn't know how it was possible, but this was undoubtedly his son. His son who was hurting, who was being hurt. Tears rolled heavily down the boy's cheeks, which were donned with familiar whisker markings he could still remember running a tender hand over. The boy's shoulders were lined with fear. He pushed himself further away from the woman, who was throwing words like monster and demon around with careless abandon as the small boy scrambled away. Minato was speechless, struck still by the horrifying sight and in wonder of his son. He was so tiny, but not tiny in the way Minato recalled. He'd grown, and Minato's heart sank when he realized that Naruto had been growing up without him all this time. It's no mystery that Jinchuriki are often treated poorly. But this was his son, a boy who was never supposed to have this burden, who had no choice. This was his baby. That was his baby. Minato had a son, and though he wasn't as small as he remembered, he was still his. Naruto wasn't an infant anymore. He'd been without Minato this whole time. Minato felt sick, his rage growing like a pot about to boil over. No one stepped forward to protect the boy, who was too innocent to be treated like this. Disdainful eyes glared down at him, and whispers attacked the child from all sides. Minato was horrified because Naruto didn't flinch at these. He was used to the glances and the whispers, maybe even the physical attacks. Minato felt himself being ripped apart from the inside, his thoughts spinning into a raging tornado that made him all the more dizzy. A cold sweat warned him that he didn't have much time left, but he pushed that back. He refused to fall now. The woman raised a hand to strike Naruto. Why, Minato didn't care. He darted forward before he realized his feet were moving, arms reaching out and delicately scooping Naruto up and off the ground. The woman paused in her assault, and Naruto froze in his arms like he was terrified for his life. It hurt. It hurt so badly that Minato couldn't stop his own tears from falling, his head still spinning and his stomach still in turmoil. He cradled the boy, turning to look at the shop owner with a look so dark it would send a whole platoon of enemy ninja running for the hills. He could see the color drain from her face. He recognized her vaguely, he realized. It only served to make him madder. Naruto sat stiffly in his arms, afraid and clearly not used to being picked up. It wasn't fair. Minato hated it. He felt sick. He was tired. Do not, Minato ground the words out, holding Naruto close. The boy stared up at him with fear and unknowing, and Minato wondered why in the world he wouldn't recognize his own father, deceased or not. Minato's heart bled. The woman mouthed his cage title, taking a small step back. Minato sneered, "Touch my son." A hand chopped into the back of his neck almost as soon as the words left his mouth. He felt Naruto get taken away from him again, snatched from his arms whilst he was unable to do a thing about it. The last thing he felt before he passed out was rage. He's not allowed to interfere. He knows this, but nonetheless, he can't detach himself. It eats at Kakashi slowly the longer he watches, like a slow fire burning through an already dying forest. Unless a real attempt is made on the blonde Jinchuriki's life, he isn't clear to step in and stop the abuse. He's forced to watch instead. Wait and almost hope they make a wrong move, just so he has an excuse to go for their throats. He's daydreamed about it. Memorized every face that's dared to glare, and every soul who dare spit an insult. Thinks of everything he could do to get back at them. It's unhealthy and crude of him, he knows. It's the only thing that helps him cope nonetheless. Rage simmers in the pit of his stomach, and he reaches up to adjust his hound mask just so he has something to do with his hands. This is the only way he's allowed to be around Naruto. Outside of that, the third Hokage has banned all interaction. It makes Kakashi want to scream, to rip his hair out and destroy everything in his path. That's his sensei's legacy down there. And if Kakashi could just take care of him, reach out and help him, he could make Naruto's life so much better. Let him be the kid he's supposed to be. Not some outcast everyone thinks it's okay to attack. Yet Hiruzen bans it. There's a small, logical part of Kakashi that can almost see why. If anyone found out the Yondaime had a son hosting a tailed beast, the threats on Naruto's life would be too severe to combat forever. They would eventually get to him, and Kakashi would certainly lose what little he had left to cling to. Minato-sensei had been such a key player in the war. Though villages were well aware Konoha had the 9 tails, they had no idea in who or where it was being held. For all they knew, it could be sealed in a teapot or sword. As if Naruto wouldn't have been in enough danger before the whole Kyuubi thing. People would be out for his blood. It was why Kushina had kept her pregnancy so private to begin with. Naruto is brilliant in many ways. A mixture of his parents in appearance and personality, a perfect blend if you ask him. He's nearly a mirror image of Kakashi's late sensei, with eyes that reflect the sea and the sky, and hair so bright it's blinding. You can still see Kushina there too, in the way the boy grins sometimes and in his untamed laugh. He's loud and boisterous, with mischief in his eyes and a pranking streak that affects nearly half the village with his severity. It's times like those when Naruto is the brightest, and when Kakashi finally feels like he can breathe. It's when he sees the 6-year-old hiding his hurt behind guarded eyes, just like Minato used to during the hardest of times, that he drowns. Naruto is smarter than anyone gives him credit for. He's not the best at his schoolwork, but he's clever and fast. He's evaded his Anbu guards more than once. Kakashi can still recall the many times he struggled to catch up with the blonde boy. It's even more impressive when you consider his chakra reserves. Kyuubi aside, Naruto is in Uzumaki. The clan had previously been known for not just their seals, but for their massive chakra reserves that made them adept at performing terrifyingly strong jutsu in quick succession of one another. Naruto had clearly inherited his mother's chakra capacity. Even at 6 years old, he had an absolute tank of untapped energy sitting beneath the surface. His ability to escape them, despite this, told Kakashi that he'd certainly grow up to do great things just like his mother and father. He'd be a powerhouse, if only the civilians could see his potential, see that he meant no harm. Kakashi squirms as he observes the scene before him. He burns and begs anyone to do anything. Naruto is so tiny and so scared. Kakashi feels ill, but he can't look away. If Naruto is going to suffer, Kakashi is too. The blonde boy doesn't know that they are in this together. The Kappa ninja would switch places with him in a heartbeat if he could, but things don't work like that, and that makes him well mad. To put things very simply, Kakashi knows what it's like to be young and have everyone glowering at you over something you can't control. To hear whispered insults and not quite understand why they're being thrown. He went through the same thing when his father came back from that mission. Experienced the same glares and the same murmurs that followed Naruto day after day. Kakashi's heart stutters. He feels something catch in his lungs as Naruto is kicked out of the food stall, skidding on the dirt road so hard it skins his hands and tears at his shorts. Kakashi can barely stand to watch him scramble away, so confused and frustrated as to why he's treated so differently than everyone else. Every instinct in the copycat nin screams at him to jump into the fray, to pick Naruto up and never put him down again. If Kushina were here, she wouldn't stand for this. She'd tear them into pieces at her own expense if she had to. And Minato-sensei, well, he'd tower over them all with his presence alone. They'd defend him no matter what. But all Kakashi can do is sit there and watch and wait. He doesn't want to stand for this anymore. He wants to save him. He wants to, someone beats him to the punch. Kakashi all but stops breathing. A ghost darts from the crowd, stealing Kakashi's remaining breath a little more with every stride. He leans forward, unbelieving of what he's seeing. Familiar arms come around Naruto, bringing him up and holding him with a close tenderness that makes Kakashi's heart weep with relief for the small boy. A smell he could never forget hits his nose, and Kakashi is tenser than he's ever been in his life. He watches as Naruto's savior turns, and suddenly the yellow hair is no longer a trick of his mind or a coincidence. A pair of blue eyes sharp with exhaustion and anger shoot a venomous glare, and a face that still danced through Kakashi's nightmare snarls. He can't believe when he sees, really. It's exactly what he sometimes dreams about at night, even if it wasn't possible. Except it was, and it was happening, and that was undoubtedly Minato-sensei. A scent isn't something that can be copied exactly. Kakashi's nose has always been sharp. It gives him the ability to identify people before he's even seen them, and detect those even when they're hiding their chakra. The fourth Hokage had always smelt like paper and ink, and a spritz of lemon air freshener that Kushina used so often it had embedded itself into their hair and clothes. The issue is that Minato Namikaze is dead. Nobody should have this smell, and certainly no one should be picking up Naruto. Kakashi's Anbu instincts kick in before anything else. He's bursting from his post before his emotions get the chance to overwhelm him, eyes set on Naruto. One arm wraps firm around the young boy. At the same time, his hand comes around the Koppa's neck and gives it a firm chop. He won't admit to anyone who asks just how hard he's breathing after the fact, or how he stumbles back as the eerie image of his dead sensei crumbles. He expects the illusion to fade, but it doesn't, and the other members of his squad emerge from their hiding places with shock evident in the way they hesitate to pick up the slouched body. He takes a deep breath. He doesn't know how the imposter is so good at this, or how he knew to go for Naruto in this form. Kakashi forces himself not to feel. He focuses on Naruto instead, who looks startled by the entire thing. The boy stares down at the blonde intruder with wide eyes, his little hands gripping Kakashi's flak jacket. The silver-haired shinobi gives a nod to his two companions, who hike the fake Minato up further before vanishing to dump him with Ibiki at the torture and interrogation building. Kakashi shifts Naruto in his grasp, leaping out of sight with incredible speed. Naruto tenses as he does, but he doesn't complain. Kakashi tries to convince himself he imagined the smell, that it was his brain tricking him into thinking it was there. Deep down, he knows better, and that scares him. It's unreal, finally getting to hold Naruto. He hasn't had the chance to since the boy was a mere infant. He's bigger now, but still impossibly small at the same time. He doesn't fight Hound or ask a barrage of questions. For once, he's uncharacteristically silent. A quick glance at his face tells Kakashi the kid's deep in thought. Kakashi wonders if he'll somehow manage to work things out. A part of him hopes he will. Maybe then Kakashi can take him in. He'll quit Anbu if that's what it takes. Anything to get Naruto the life he deserves. Kakashi knows he's far from the best candidate for that sort of thing, but he likes to think he's better than no one at all. Naruto recognizes the man carrying him, if only vaguely. His chakra is a familiar thrum that makes him think that maybe it's okay to hold onto him for a moment and let himself be carried. He's not entirely sure what just happened or how he should feel about it. A stranger that looked suspiciously familiar had saved him from what would have definitely devolved into a beating, and then scooped him up and called him his son. Naruto would have been inclined to call him a crazy old man, if not for the fact that they did indeed look nearly identical. The same hair, the same eyes, and the same skin tone. Their faces were kinda the same too. Not exact, but if Naruto had a dad, then he had a mom too, so it made sense that he'd look like both of them. Hound is one of the shadows that hangs around Naruto's house at night, and maybe in other places too. Naruto can feel him sometimes, and catch glimpses of him from the corner of his eye. He has other shadows too, but none of them leave toys like Hound does, or tuck him in when they think he's asleep. If Naruto has any friends at all out there, he thinks Hound is probably one of them. He doesn't talk to him like Jiji does, but Naruto can tell he cares. Even if he doesn't really show himself. That's okay. Naruto wishes, aches, yearns for some sort of familial connection, but that doesn't mean he'll complain about what he's already gotten. It's better than nothing at all. He knows this all too well, and he doesn't want to risk driving Hound away. Kakashi goes to give his report with Naruto in tow, whilst the fake Minato is teleported off to be rung for information. The look on Ibiki's face was comical enough to send Anko into a fit of raunchy laughter that got her kicked out of the room. Medics were called when they all realized that fake Minato wasn't in the best shape. Not because they wanted to help him, but because they didn't want him to die before they could find out who sent him. It was odd that he should come in with such low chakra and so blatantly. Was it an attempt to plant a spy? If it was a ludicrous attempt. Surely whoever sent this man knew that. The Yondaime had died 6 years ago. This man was certainly a carbon copy of him, but he surely would have visibly aged after that amount of time. Even if only a little. Grown out his hair a little or cut it short. Put on some clothes other than the ones he'd been wearing when he died. It's uncanny, honestly. Inoichi observed the man through a shield of one-way glass. They'd laid him out on one of their metal tables and stuck an Roman 4 in him. He was severely dehydrated, but he didn't seem particularly injured. The chakra exhaustion was so serious it was a shock he'd been conscious when Hound had first knocked him out. His chakra, it feels the same. It's just like I remember it. I've never seen anything like it. I'm not sure it's an illusion either. Ibiki's tone was gruff. Inoichi's gaze snapped to him, surprise displayed starkly on his face. The head interrogator dragged a kunai pouch off the table in front of them and tossed it to the Yamanaka. Open that. We can't question him until the Hawkage arrives, but I'm starting to think this is more than a shitty attempt at infiltration. Inoichi swallowed at the implication Ibiki's words carried. The man the Anbu had brought in looked abnormally like the Yondaime Hawkage. There wasn't a single detail they'd missed, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't seem to detect or lift whatever transformation this man was under. Assuming he was under one. Ibiki seemed pretty sure there wasn't one present, but what did that mean for them? Was he indicating that this was somehow the actual fourth Hawkage? Inoichi opened the weapons pouch and peered inside. He felt the color drain from his face as soon as he spotted them. A pair of very, very familiar three-pronged kunai stared back at him. Inoichi quite suddenly wasn't sure what he should believe anymore. When Minato comes to, he knows immediately that he isn't alone in whatever room he's been hoisted off to. He feels stronger now, and not like he's going to be sick the moment he tries to sit up. The pounding in his head has shrunk itself into a dull thrum. The blond man took in a deep breath. Unlike before, it felt like his lungs were finally able to get enough air, whereas before he felt almost like he was being constricted. The expanding of his chest and stomach only serves to wake him up even more. He forced his eyes open, squinting just briefly at the fluorescent lights overhead. His mind began to pick up speed, his thoughts pouring in like water through a dam break. He was definitely on a metal table of sorts. The last thing he could recall was scooping Naruto up. Someone had jumped down from the trees and knocked him out soon after. He wanted to be mad, but he understood. If Naruto was already that old, then Minato had been gone for at least 5 years, maybe more. Him being detained made sense. He'd left Naruto alone for all that time. Who had been taking care of him in his stead? Did he know about his parents at all? Was Kakashi okay? Was Naruto? The villagers had been so full of disgust and bubbling hatred that oozed over and out into the open. So blatantly cruel to someone who quite clearly had no idea what was wrong. Naruto was a mere child, undeserving of that type of attention. He needed to be cherished and loved. Minato wondered if there was anyone to make sure Naruto ate his vegetables and brushed his teeth. Someone to tuck him in at night and hold him when he had nightmares. to give him over-the-top birthday parties and spoil him. All the things he and Kushina had stayed up talking about for hours and hours on end. Had Naruto gotten that? Minato felt numb. The yondaime forced himself to turn his head, his eyes just managing to adjust. His gaze immediately landed on the stiff form of Hiruzen Sarutobi. The man looked nothing like Minato remembered. It appeared as though he'd aged several decades since Minato'd last seen him, with deep lines of exhaustion wrinkling his cheeks and a furrow in his brows that looked like it was permanent. He wore a set of robes Minato hadn't seen him in since the very day he'd succeeded the older man, his large hat sitting in his lap as he contemplated him. An Anbu with rather familiar hair stood at attention by his side, as well as Inoichi Yamanaka. He too looked older. It only confirmed to Minato that something had happened. Somehow he had traveled through time. Minato's gaze lingered on who was quite clearly Kakashi. He was taller than before and a bit broader in the shoulders. Minato couldn't help but feel a bit of panic begin to creep up his spine. 5-6 years. Had he truly been gone that long? That wasn't possible. He'd have understood it if maybe he ended up in a coma somehow, but no. They all thought he was dead. Minato had thought so too. He could still feel the excruciating pain that came from being impaled and the cold sensation that followed. The inability to move that overtook him, and the terror he couldn't help but feel as he and Kushina struggled to keep the Kyuubi at bay with everything they had. "Where's Naruto?" He breathed in lieu of anything else to say. The hound Anbu flinched nearly imperceptibly at the question, confirming his identity in the yondaime's eyes. Minato's Adam's apple bobbed as he pushed himself up slightly. "Hiruzen Minato." The man's voice made his mouth clamp shut. He forced himself into an upright position. The Roman 4 in his arm slipped out, but he didn't care enough to pay it much mind. Hiruzen inspected him contemplatively. It's not possible to mimic chakra signatures exactly. It's been experimented with over the years, yes, but no one has ever reported to have succeeded. The third seemed impossibly tired. To keep Danzo from the title, he'd clearly had to take his title back. Minato's mind flashed back to the night of the attack. Hiruzen's wife by Wako had been lost that day too. The memory was enough to make him close his eyes for a moment just to try and breathe. Inoichi remained silent, his hands clasped together in front of him. Minato could feel himself being dissected. Normally, the prying eyes would have made him uncomfortable and weary, but he couldn't bring himself to care. He understood. He tried to catalog all the information he'd gathered so far. It was easier to think now. The haze had thinned enough for him to fight through it. He'd woken up 5 to 6 years in the future. He hadn't seemed to have aged during that time, and his injuries were gone. Was he real? It was an odd question to consider, but there was no real explanation for any of this. He felt like a person. He sure didn't think he was an intruder. He was just himself. Was Naruto okay? Being a young Jinchuriki implied he had Anbu guards. Kushina had when they were younger and in the academy. One of them must have zeroed in on him and knocked him out when he decided to pick Naruto up. Possibly Kakashi even. Minato sure wasn't going to blame him. Even so, he still felt his hands curl into fists, his throat tightening when he thought back to the expression on his son's face. He'd been so afraid, but he hadn't been surprised. Why hadn't he been surprised? No child should be used to treatment like that. It made him dizzy with rage. "No," Minato answered finally, trying to calm himself. He raised his eyes to meet Hiruzen's. "It's not." The silence following his words was almost deafening with its gravity. His claim wasn't to be taken lightly, and if they decided he was lying, he knew he'd be killed. Inoichi inhaled sharply, and Hiruzen observed him with quiet contemplation. Minato didn't break eye contact. He couldn't stay here. He had to get out and find Naruto. He was glad the village was okay, and that Hiruzen was doing well. That mattered little at the moment, because his son needed him. Kakashi, too. Minato had been good friends with Sakumo, and he'd watched over Kakashi from the time he was a young boy. He'd taken care of him when he was sick or injured, and made sure he had food to eat and clothes that fit. He'd been through a lot, losing both of his teammates and his father, and Minato knew losing himself and Kushina had to have been hard on him. Minato couldn't help but feel relieved just to look at him. To see him and know that he was still alive and breathing too, and that he hadn't done anything reckless. Knowing that Naruto had at least had someone, while he was away, lifted something dark and heavy off of his chest. Hiruzen swallowed heavily, taking in a shaky breath that he did his best to hide. This Minato's chakra was exact. Kakashi had confirmed that his scent was the same as well, as though he'd never left. He hadn't aged a day in the past 6 years. He still made the same expressions, too. You could tell exactly what he was thinking if you knew him well enough. The kunai he'd had in his possession were proven to be authentic by the resident weapons specialist. It was like sitting down to look at a ghost. Hiruzen almost wanted to reach out and confirm whether or not Minato was tangible. He had seen a number of odd things in his lifetime, not all of them plausible. This was something else. To vanish for 6 years only to awaken unchanged. It didn't make any sort of logical sense. "Can you prove you're who you look to be?" Hiruzen asked quietly, not daring to hope. Minato leaned back. "Can I see Naruto if I do?" Minato questioned. Hiruzen couldn't help but smile just a little. "Of course, Minato." Hiruzen promised. And that was enough for him. Inoichi retreated out of Minato's mind after only 2 minutes of being there, stumbling back like he'd just been set on fire, his eyes wide. Minato jolted up with concern etched deep in his expression, his shoulders tense as Inoichi sputtered out that yes, this was undoubtedly their 4th Hokage. Hiruzen had collapsed back into his seat with wide eyes and no small amount of shock. No remains had ever been found for the blonde Cage. His bloodied coat and the last eyewitness accounts of those few who'd been present were all they'd had to go off of. They'd ultimately deduced that Minato Namikaze had perished during the Kyubai's rampage on the village. That he died a hero, sealing the 9-tailed demon away before it could do any more harm. That was the reputation he'd left in his wake. Minato pushed himself to his feet, his gaze lifting to Kakashi almost immediately. The young man was still frozen in place. Disbelief cycled through him like murky water through an outdoor fountain. He could remember the numerous sleepless nights in which he'd mourned for his sensei. The pain of having to sort through his belongings because he was listed as the man's next of kin. Watching Naruto begin to grow up without his father, and having to witness just how similar he was to his deceased parents. It all flooded through him at once. His teacher was actually alive. Minato Namikaze had somehow survived the Kyuubi attack, and though it had been nearly 6 years since then, he'd made his way home. He was looking at Kakashi with fond, apologetic eyes, like he was saying sorry for being gone so long. And he truly was. He could almost see the hurt spilling out of Kakashi, leaking out of his pores. He had been through far too much in his lifetime, Minato decided. Tragedy after tragedy had worn Kakashi down and chipped away at what small semblance of stability he was still able to cling to. Minato knew this. He had always known this. But he was back now, and he was going to take care of him just like he did before, and Naruto as well. His son wasn't going to have to bear those glares and hateful whispers anymore. Not if Minato had anything to say about it. Kakashi. Minato tried when the young man didn't move. He took a small step forward, placing a hand on Hiruzen's shoulder as he went. The 3rd Hokage grasped his forearm gently, giving it a squeeze as he unceremoniously wiped at his eyes. Inoichi had to step out of the room for a moment, still worked up from being inside Minato's mind and seeing the confirmation they'd all hoped for, but hadn't thought would come. Minato would have to remember to thank him for it later. "Sensei." Kakashi wheezed out. The blond man reached up, unhooking his student's Anbu mask and tugging it away. He looked so much older now. At 20 years old, he'd sprouted into a strong, honorable young man. Minato felt like he'd missed so much. He'd missed Kakashi growing into adulthood, and Naruto's first milestones and birthdays. What other experiences had Minato been robbed of? What highs and lows? Look at you. You're almost taller than I am. Minato laughed, unable to stop his eyes from watering with emotion at the sight of his not-so-little-anymore student. I'm sorry I was gone for so long, Kakashi. It seems like I've missed out on a lot. Kakashi's tears spilled over unbidden as the blond man captured him in a firm hug. It was the type of embrace Kakashi used to grumpily pull away from when he was younger. He melted into it now, his arms coming up and returning it just as he'd always wished he had when his sensei was still alive. Kakashi didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Instead, he buried his face in his sensei's shoulder and let himself weep. It's inconceivable, and Hiruzen wonders how he's going to break it to the council, and to the village as a whole. Such a thing shouldn't have been a possibility. He knew they'd be met with waves of disbelief, and he couldn't say he'd blame them for it. It was astonishing to see Minato Namikaze, alive and smiling as brightly as the last time Hiruzen had seen him. He thought of all the things that would change now that the blond man was back. Once it was established that he was alive and was who he claimed to be, he could get caught up on current events and retake his place as the fourth. The village standing would be re-strengthened, and the village reinvigorated with his return. And Naruto. Hiruzen's mind halted on him as Minato pulled back from his hug with Kakashi, his blue eyes turning steely as he asked to be taken to his son. It made sense. He had gone straight for Naruto as soon as he got back, searching for him from the moment he stepped foot into the village. Minato had been backed into a corner and forced to seal the 9 tails in Naruto, fighting to keep his infant son alive. Waking up after weighing his son down with such a burden had to have sent him into a frenzy of worry, not knowing whether or not his son was alive, or healthy, or able to bear the chakra. Hiruzen had put strict rules in place to keep Naruto from finding out he was a Jinchuriki, and to keep other nations from finding out he was one. It being forbidden to speak prevented civilians from outright saying it, but their distaste towards the boy had always been clear. It wasn't something Hiruzen could publicly address without causing some sort of uproar, or without it getting out of the village just what Naruto was hosting. Hiruzen's hands were tied. Shamefully, he could admit to having been somewhat neglectful of Naruto's needs. He made sure he had money and a place to sleep, and visited with him regularly to see how he was doing, but he did little to check in on the behavior of Konoha's residents. He knew it was less than acceptable. Minato wasn't going to be very happy about that. Hiruzen remembered him to be a kind, level-headed man. This, understandably, was not something he would simply sit back and accept. Minato barely stopped to ask if he was dismissed before Hiruzen was standing and waving him off. His only request was that Minato be ready to come back to speak with the elders of Konoha, and that he try to keep himself out of heavily populated roads until the announcement of his survival was broadcast. Minato smiled and bowed his agreement to the terms before turning to race after Kakashi, who was just itching to take his sensei to his son. The copycat ninja was excited to finally meet the boy, and to be able to watch him get the family he deserved. Finally he'd be safe, and loved, and treated as he deserved. Kakashi was practically teeming with excitement. There was something unbelievable about looking back and seeing his sensei darting after him. So alive and vivid, with a determined smile set on his face and trust in his eyes. He took off after Kakashi, wordlessly accepting his student's guidance and not once doubting him. There had always been something so earth-shattering about Minato's faith. It was so easy to earn and just as easy to lose. To maintain it was truly a feat. To see it still intact after 6 years made Kakashi's eyes water uncharacteristically, and he tried to slow his racing heart. He wasn't sure whether or not this was a dream. If it was, he never wanted it to end. The village has changed so much. Minato called over the wind, rushing past his ears. Kakashi's gaze snapped to him, his one visible eye widening as though he hadn't expected to be talked to. Minato couldn't help but laugh a little. I'm glad it's recovered so well. Though I can't say I'm super happy about how I found Naruto. It was said with a smile, but Kakashi could detect an undertone of threat in his voice. He was still upset, and rightfully so. His first glimpse of his son 6 years in the future, and he's watching the boy get kicked in the stomach and called a demon. If not for his sensei's godlike patience, Kakashi was sure the man would have run off to find the offender and confronted them by their throat. Kakashi felt his heart squeeze as he thought about having to tell his sensei what had been going on with Naruto, the searing heat of shame burning a hole in his chest. He could feel Minato's gaze focused on his face, unwavering but not accusing. Minato knew just by looking at Kakashi that he'd done what he could. Hiruzen's tension when Minato requested to go find Naruto told him that the elders of the village had played a large part in whatever had been going on. He didn't know how the abuse had started, just that it wasn't okay by any means. His head spun, imagining his son in any sort of pain. Naruto, obviously, wasn't the same infant Minato remembered, but the connection he felt to the boy remained, and the love was as strong as ever. The all-encompassing feeling of being willing to do anything to ensure one person's happiness filled him with a warm glow. I haven't been allowed to meet him, Kakashi admitted. Minato's face creased with a frown. Kakashi hadn't been allowed to talk to Naruto. Not many know he's your son. The other nations would send assassins in droves if they found out, especially if they knew of his status as a Jinchuriki. The third forbid anyone from speaking of either. Anyone who knew you has been banned from contact with him. Being his Anbu guard has been my only way to get close to him, sensei. Minato sucked in a sharp breath of air that made Kakashi flinch mid-jump. He couldn't bring himself to look at the man. He was afraid of what he'd see. He feared he'd turn, and the dream would end, and suddenly Minato would be looming over him, asking him why he never acted and helped Naruto. It wouldn't be the first time he'd had a nightmare like that. Failing Minato-sensei is something he had always feared, and he felt like he truly had when it came to Naruto. What he was doing wasn't enough. He could have found a way to go behind Lord Third's back, but he hadn't, and, thank you, Kakashi. Minato's voice drew his attention again. Minato smiled at his student, radiating reassurance. Thank you for protecting him until now. You did all you could, and that's more than I ever could have asked for. Kakashi was forced to look away and wipe at his eyes again. Minato laughed a little, giving the headache a hearty pat on the back. He was glad Kakashi had been here. Sure, Minato was scared of what he was going to find, terrified, really, and he wasn't too happy with the Sandaime, but at least Kakashi had tried. It was more than Minato could say for anyone else so far. The abuse against Naruto was obviously severe, and Hiruzen had just let it happen. Minato didn't care about the circumstance. No child should be treated like that by anyone. Especially not Naruto, who had been forced to give up so much without even knowing or having a choice. Minato still felt laden with guilt, knowing what he had sealed in his son. If there were any other option, he would have taken it. Kakashi told Minato a little about Naruto. He was a prankster who took after Kushina and could eat his weight in ramen. He was unbelievably slippery, sometimes even evading Kakashi on his best days. He was a natural chakra sensor just like Minato, able to pick up on and differentiate people's unique signatures. It wasn't a skill that was honed, but Kakashi left himself purposely open for the boy to feel. At least that way he knew he wasn't alone. It was far from the best, but still better than nothing. His favorite color was an orange that would make your eyes hurt if you looked at it for too long, and he had already heartily declared that his dream was to be Hokage someday. He was an optimistic kid, even with the constant glares. He knew how to put a smile on and ignore it all. Minato was practically tripping over himself listening to the details, soaking up the information like a greedy sponge and asking a million questions. The information didn't feel like enough. Nothing did. Nothing ever would be. These 6 years were years he'd never get back no matter how much he learned about them, he knew. Minato felt his bright smile dim quite a bit as Kakashi turned, and began to beeline towards a dilapidated apartment building that looked to be on the verge of toppling over. The roof was missing a fair amount of shingles, and some of the railing on the upper floor's walkways was gone entirely. Cracks in the foundation climbed up and into the chipped brick walls. The entire structure looked like it might be leaning to the side, sagging awkwardly. Minato could feel his heart rate begin to speed up the closer they got to it. The alley behind it had a massive pile of trash bags that had yet to be picked up, and a few homeless folks were sitting about and smoking cigarettes. Kakashi leapt towards the building. Minato took a deep breath and followed. Kakashi landed on the upper floor in front of a door that Minato knew immediately was his son's. The door had a few gashes in it that luckily didn't seem to go all the way through. The knob looked like it was about to fall off, tilted in a way that made it seem as though someone had tried to wriggle it off. Words like monster and demon had been painted on crudely. Minato could tell someone had tried futilely to scrub the letters off to no avail. He felt his heart ache at the sight, the image of his 6-year-old son forced to try and wash insults off the entrance to his home, making him blink back tears. Kakashi observed his sensei for a moment, soaking in his image as he knocked. There was a pause, and then the sound of shuffling on the other side of the door. Minato held his breath as the click of a latch being undone sounded. He took a small step back, his heart racing. His son was in there. He was already so big. Would he want to meet Minato? Would he be upset because he'd been gone so long? Kakashi put a hand on his sensei's shoulder, unable to stop from basking in the solid warmth. He was alive, and he was here for Naruto. He was back. It felt like the world had been righted again. Things had been so off-kilter since his death. The entire village had been on edge, and the tensions that had arisen were severe. Him being back was a blessing in more ways than one. The door creaked open hesitantly, a small form peeking out of the created crack. A large blue eye, the same color as Minato's, gazed up at them with apprehension and fear. Minato felt his heart seize at the sight, his eyes going wide. Naruto was so tiny. He looked so much like him, but like Kushina too, and it was almost too much. There was a defiant glint in his eye as he opened the door a little wider, his little shoulders tense. He was ready to run if he needed to. It made Minato's eyes sting harder. Naruto's gaze shifted to Kakashi, eyes moving up to his hair. He had felt his chakra enough to recognize him. It was the only reason he had answered the door. This was undoubtedly his shadow. The nice one. The man from earlier was there too, looking at him like he'd just shattered his entire world and then put it back together again all in the span of a few seconds. Naruto felt his little hands grip the door's knob and frame, the memory of the man scooping him up coming back unbidden. He had called him his son, but Naruto wasn't good enough for parents, was he? He'd been an orphan his whole life. His parents hadn't wanted him, he was told. He understood. The villagers had to be calling him a demon for a reason. Even if Naruto didn't know exactly why, would they do that for no reason? He didn't know. He didn't think so. The man had picked him up, though. He had held him so carefully, like he'd break if he wasn't careful. He'd defended him. When was the last time someone had done that? Naruto couldn't think of nearly any occasion where someone had so blatantly protected him. He'd been thinking about it since it happened, coming back to his apartment to sit quietly. He was unable to conjure up his usual energy, drifting in a haze as he replayed the situation over and over again in his mind. He wanted to brush it off like he did everything else, but how could he? The shadow who watched him didn't speak, but the blonde one did crouch down so they could be eye level. Naruto flinched back slightly, staring at him nervously. He felt an uncomfortable tension fill his chest. This man looked a lot like him. They had the same yellow hair, and their eyes were the same too. So was their skin color and parts of their face. It was like him, but big. Were they actually related, for real? Naruto couldn't help but feel a little hopeful at the thought of family. He dreamed about it endlessly, his mind wandering to it during class. What it would be like to go home to a mom and dad who loved him. To eat a hot meal that wasn't made in a microwave and be read to sleep and helped with his homework. Today, he hadn't been able to stop himself from daydreaming about what it would be like to have a dad like the blonde man. Imagine that maybe he hadn't been lying when he'd called him his son, and let warmth fill his chest despite knowing better. Now Naruto felt unsure. Maybe a bit scared. He hadn't expected to ever see the blonde stranger again. He'd expected him to forever remain nameless, a figment to be used in Naruto's pathetic fantasies of a normal life where he was loved. Only now he was here, and he had no idea if that was a good or bad thing. "What do you want?" He tried to sound strong, but his voice came out shaky. He did his best to hold back a pout. The man gave a weak chuckle, his lips upturning sadly. Naruto wondered why he looked so upset. He'd seen people get mad at him before. They got disgusted and enraged and annoyed, but not solemn. Not like this. "Hey, Naruto." The man's voice was impossibly soft and kind. Naruto flinched back, eyes going wide. No one ever spoke to him like that before. In that tone, and looked at him with those eyes, free of hostility. Jiji was nice, but there was always something in his eyes that made Naruto feel like he should leave as soon as possible. He took a small step back. "I know you don't know me, but my name is Minato Namikaze, and this is my friend Kakashi. I picked you up earlier. Do you remember?" Naruto gave a quiet nod, and Minato beamed at him in a way that made Naruto feel like he was worth something. A wave of adoration washed over the blonde Cage, sudden and overwhelming as he gazed at his son. He and Kushina had created this. This adorable, squishy little boy with the biggest, bluest eyes and cutest little face. And his hands were so tiny, and he was just, Minato loved him. He wanted to sit down and talk to him for hours and hours, and find out everything there was to know about him. He wanted to cuddle him, and buy him anything he wanted for his bedroom, and teach him how to hold his first kunai. Tuck him in and cook him food, and take him off to festivals and the playground. Minato could practically feel his chest about to burst with the elation the mere sight of Naruto brought him. "I'm glad. I'm sorry if I scared you earlier," Minato said as cheerfully as he could manage. "You know, you and I look a lot alike. We both have really yellow hair. And blue eyes." Naruto blurted out, his hands coming to clap over his mouth soon after. Minato almost melted at the sound of his voice, smiling so hard it hurt. He blinked his tears back. Kakashi wiped at his eye, glancing away for a moment to collect himself. He almost couldn't handle this. Naruto deserved this. Kakashi was so glad his sensei was back. He remembered being so upset they'd never recovered a body. To think that would turn into such a blessing. "And blue eyes," Minato agreed with a chuckle. He tilted his head. "There's a reason for that, but I have to tell you something first. Is that okay?" Naruto nodded adamantly, opening his door completely with curious eyes. He got the distinct sense that this man meant no harm. How could he possibly be dangerous if he was with his shadow? He seemed kind, looking at him with a gaze Naruto had always yearned for. His voice was so nice and soft, and Naruto just wanted to curl up in a ball and go to sleep listening to it. It sounded like what safety felt like. Naruto didn't know this man. He didn't want to let his guard down so fast, but he almost couldn't help himself as the man smiled at him so openly. No one had ever done that to him. Even when they tried to trick him, you could always see it in their eyes that they were lying. This man's eyes just looked warm and fond. 6 years ago I got really, really hurt. I almost died. Minato admitted. Naruto nodded, blinking. Minato gave a beaming smile. This was an abridged version of events, but attempting to explain something even Minato didn't understand to a 6-year-old didn't seem like a great idea. I actually just woke up today. And when I did, I ran to the village as fast as I could to look for someone. Naruto's eyes went wide. He moved to grip the hem of his shirt nervously, eyeing Minato with renewed suspicion. The man scooted forward just slightly. Naruto watched him with a surprising amount of openness, like he was just waiting for Minato to be trustworthy and hoping despite having been hurt so many times. It was astonishing to see. Minato could see himself mirrored in Naruto. It was like seeing his reflection in a rippled pond. Not exact, but there nonetheless. It made his heart soar. This was his son. This was Naruto. It seemed like only yesterday, literally, that he was excitedly anticipating his arrival. I had a little boy right before I got hurt and went to sleep. I named him Naruto. Minato admitted in a tone so quiet you almost couldn't hear it. Kakashi nodded as though to back him up. Minato's smile turned sad without him meaning it to, watching a variety of emotions flit across his son's face. He tried to phrase it as softly and simply as he could, but it sounded unbelievable even in his ears. Naruto didn't move, his mind catching up to Minato's words. You could practically see the cogs turning in his little head. Minato waited patiently for him to process, keeping his body language honest and open. A door down the hall opened, but Minato didn't so much as move or even glimpse away from his son. Kakashi shot a glare at the prying eyes, defensive enough to ward them away. Naruto swallowed, staring at the man. He looked very nice, like a dad might. Sakura-chan said that parents were supposed to take care of you no matter what, and love you, and give you hugs and kisses whenever you needed. He had seen other parents with their kids. Naruto had thought he hadn't had that, or that he never would, rather. But what if Minato was telling the truth, and he was his dad? Naruto wanted to believe it more than anything. It was just hard to. No one had ever wanted him before. But if this guy really had gotten hurt and couldn't come get Naruto, it made sense that he'd come as soon as he woke up. It wasn't his fault he couldn't come if he'd gotten that injured, right? Then maybe he did still want Naruto. Even though he was big now, and the caretakers at the orphanage had told him that parents only wanted babies. Maybe Naruto could. He took a small step forward. Minato perked up, smiling hopefully at the boy, trying to convey with every fiber of his being just how badly he wanted this. He knew this was out of the blue and a little awkward and not official in the least. Minato simply couldn't wait anymore. He couldn't. It had been 6 years too long, and he wasn't going to waste another second getting his son what he needed. He refused to stand around hoping the elders truly believed he was back and allowed him to see his little boy. Back from the dead or not, he was Hawkage. He could do whatever he wanted. I have a dad. Naruto's voice came out a lot smaller than he'd wanted it to, cracking pathetically halfway through. He flinched at the sound of it, taking a small step back. Minato nodded readily, beaming at him. Naruto couldn't believe it. He had a dad. Like a real family. He had always wanted a family. Jiji was the closest thing he had to one, and the Shadow too. If Shadow was here, maybe they could all be a family together. Maybe it wasn't too good to be true. Even though Naruto was hated, and a monster, not a normal child by any means, maybe, he wanted to cry. He couldn't stop tears from welling in his eyes. If this was a joke, it was a really, really mean one. I'm sorry I was gone so long, Naruto. I'm sorry I wasn't here to protect you. Minato breathed. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I won't let anyone hurt you, and I won't leave you alone. I promise. If you just give me a chance, I promise. I love you more than anything else in the entire world. The day your mother told me you were going to be born was the happiest day of my entire life. I know you don't know me yet, but if you would give me a chance, Minato didn't get to finish. Naruto moved with speed that put him to shame, launching himself at his father with a loud wail that rattled the apartment's windows with its volume. Minato caught him readily, standing up quickly with his son in his arms and holding him close. Naruto wrapped around him like a koala around a tree, burying his face in the man's shoulder as he sobbed, hugging him tight and not caring whether or not this was a lie. Even if it was, he was going to enjoy it as much as he could. Even if he didn't really mean it and left, Naruto didn't care. No one had ever said they loved him before, not once. No one promised to protect him or said they were happy he was born. So no, he didn't care if this was being made up. If this was a dream, he didn't care if he was going to wake up. To feel this even for a second, it was worth it. He wanted a family. He just wanted a family to take care of him because he was tired. He was so alone, and he hated it. He was tired of being hungry and cold, and living in this place with all its drunks and angry neighbors. Minato squeezed his eyes closed, holding Naruto firmly. His shoulders relaxed for the first time all day, and he smiled. No one was going to touch Naruto ever again. Not on his watch. He tugged Kakashi into the hug too, of course. The copycat nin didn't dare pull away. Naruto decides that he's dreaming. He must be. There's no other explanation for this that makes sense. Minato speaks to Naruto's shadow, Kakashi, he guesses, in a low tone, as though not wanting to disturb him, rubbing his hand up and down his back in the most comforting way possible. Naruto thinks it's the nicest anyone's ever been to him. Naruto can't stop sniffling and hiccuping, finally able to stop crying after who knows how long. He keeps waiting for the ball to drop, for this man to throw him to the ground and laugh in his face for daring to hope, or having the audacity to think he was actually worthy of something like this. Naruto can almost hear the taunts drifting past his ears. He grips the man tightly, waiting. It still hasn't happened. More and more time passes, and the man is still holding him, loving him. Naruto has never felt loved before. It feels nice and warm, and he never wants it to end. The seconds keep crawling by, and he's still being held. Still being murmured to and told how happy his dad is to have him. His dad. Naruto can't believe it. He refuses to pull back, afraid it'll all end if he dares. He stays with his face planted in his father's shoulder, soaking it all in and trying to remember how to breathe. He can't fully wrap his head around it. He doesn't know if this is real, but it's the best day of his life either way. Even if it's a trick. Just to experience this, it's everything. Minato eyes Naruto's small apartment with barely masked distaste and horror. He can hardly process the fact that his son lives here. This is not the place for a child. The wooden floors were cracked and scuffed, peeling up at the edges and warped from water damage. There's visible mold growing and plaster flaking off in chunks. He doesn't even want to know what the stains on the ceiling are from. It smells of stale ramen and mildew, and the window has a hole in it covered by tape and a chunk of cardboard. The place is about as far from healthy as you can get. Minato can hardly stand it, his heart clenching uncomfortably. He tightens his grip on his son minimally. Naruto isn't going to step into this place ever again if he has anything to say about it. No more sleeping on a dingy mattress that looks no more than an inch thick. He's going to have a real home. Help me get what he needs. I don't want to stay here any longer than we have to. Minato requested, eyes roaming the place. A few drawings Minato will most definitely be framing are tacked up on the wall, and a calendar hangs by his fridge, which is ancient even by Minato's slightly outdated standards. Kakashi gave a nod, producing a sealing scroll from one of the pouches on his leg. You got it, sensei. Kakashi glanced around. Naruto's apartment had always made his nose scrunch up, but it was even worse without his Anbu mask on. He'd be glad to never see it again. I've got to warn you, he doesn't own much. For now. Why did Minato's smile look so threatening? Kakashi was too happy to have him back to care. Gathering Naruto's things up didn't take long. He had a few plush toys that Kakashi had gotten him, as well as a nightcap. The pile of clothes he owns is too small to even be considered a complete load of laundry. Minato gave it a disdainful look, vowing to get the boy more of everything. More toys and clothes and academy supplies. The scrappy notebook Kakashi drags out, and the stubby pencils are cheap and have been sharpened to half their length, with erasers used down to nubs. Minato mentally took stock of everything, watching Kakashi toss a small frog wallet under the pile. He couldn't help but smile at the sight. Maybe his son was partial to toads, or perhaps that had been solely his student's doing. Naruto risked peeking up as Minato bent down to pick up the worn-out blanket Jiji had gifted him. He didn't pull back, simply eyeing the pile over his dad's shoulder when the man turned around. He was startled to see all his meager belongings piled up that way. He immediately felt himself tense, his chest squeezing uncomfortably. What were they going to do to it? People had destroyed his things before. His old neighbor had broken in once and shattered the only dishes he had. Naruto had been using an old Tupperware lid as a plate ever since. A plastic instant ramen cup had been washed out and was reserved for drinking too, but he didn't see either of those things on the pile. Maybe they hadn't realized. Minato seemed to notice Naruto's sudden change in posture, placing a reassuring hand on his stiff back and taking a deep breath. Naruto steeled himself for the worst. "Don't worry, Naruto. We're just packing up your things so you can come with us. We're not going to let you live here anymore, all right?" Minato kept his voice as cheerful as possible. The reaction he got was immediate and a lot more violent than he'd have expected. Naruto ripped himself back from the man, going against his previous worries, his blue eyes impossibly wide. Minato smiled, taking in his son's face. He really was the cutest kid he'd ever seen in his life. Kakashi was a close second, but he wasn't going to risk telling the young man that. Naruto couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Had he imagined that? Surely not. Naruto could safely say that he hated it here, yeah. He hated the drunk neighbors and the homeless folk that would try to grab him by the arm on his way up, and he hated the couple downstairs that would scream at each other all night. It smelt bad and was drafty, and the roof leaked when it rained. The mere thought of getting to stay anywhere else sounded like heaven on earth. But was this really his dad? Was this not a dream? Was Naruto really going to live somewhere else, with a family? Sounded kind of fake, actually. "Come with you where?" Naruto sputtered out, hands clenching into Minato's shirt. Minato gave a small laugh that made his son's cheeks flush with mild embarrassment. He glanced away, pouting in a way that made Minato want to coo. "To our house?" Minato grinned at him. Naruto's heart fluttered at the use of our. It made it sound like it was his too, even though he knew that couldn't possibly be what this guy meant. "You'll have your own room and everything." "How's that sound?" Naruto looked flummoxed by the notion. It was adorable. Kakashi gave a small chuckle, ruffling the blonde boy's hair as he passed by to seal everything up. Naruto's head whipped towards him, and he seemed even further perplexed as Kakashi smiled at him. If that really was his shadow like Naruto was so sure it was, then was this actually real? His shadow didn't usually speak, but that also meant he didn't lie either. If that were the case then, no, it was impossible. It had to be impossible. He turned back towards his proclaimed father, pressing his lips together tight and willing himself not to cry. Minato smiled at him, welcoming and urging Naruto to believe in him. Naruto observed him critically, trying to get the cogs in his brain to turn faster than a snail's pace. They did look a lot alike. Like a lot alike. Naruto had never seen someone who looked so similar to himself before, though he had sometimes imagined some of his other classmates were his siblings, and that he'd get to go home with them when the day was done. Of course, he never did, but the fantasy was enough to get him through the day with a smile on his face. This man was familiar. Naruto felt like he'd seen him before, or like he knew him. Actually, no, he had seen him before, and it wasn't just because of the hair and eyes. Naruto had undoubtedly run across this face before, but he was so sure he'd never met Minato in the past. He would have remembered something like, "Wait a second. Whoa." Naruto gasped out, eyes practically popping out of his skull. He leaned as far away from his father as he could, taking him all in. That was it. Without a doubt. Wow, Naruto was a genius for cracking this one. My dad is the fourth Hokage. No way. I thought you were dead, believe it. Minato let out an unrestrained laugh at the outburst. Naruto couldn't help but grin too, the sudden onslaught of excitement that rushed through his veins too much to hold back. Minato felt himself sober slightly at the sight of his son's smile, but he did his best not to let it show. Not because he wasn't impossibly happy, he was. It was just undoubtedly Kushina's smile. It matched it to a T. Big and crooked and a little goofy, but unquestionably genuine. It was like he was watching Naruto unfold and come to life before his very eyes, exuding all the best parts of his mother out for the world to see. Kakashi just chuckled, tucking the ceiling scroll back into the pouch it had come from. Minato tried not to be too overwhelmed, pushing his grief off. Right now it was crucial he not scare his son off. If there was anyone you could trust, Naruto clearly assumed it was a Hokage. He opened up like a blooming flower, petals unfurling. He asked a million questions that Minato was more than happy to answer, riveted by his son's enthusiasm. What was it like facing the Kyuubi? Was he a ghost? How did he survive? Was he still hurt? The small blonde seemed to deem it okay that he'd been gone so long, but only because he'd gotten hurt fighting a giant nine-tailed demon. Which was pretty cool, apparently. He had stated as such in a very matter-of-fact tone that left little to no room for argument. Naruto had then very happily jabbered on about how he couldn't believe this was actually for real, and that now he could have a real family and no one could bully him. Minato's smile had gone a little stiff at that, but he'd agreed. Naruto certainly wouldn't be discriminated against anymore. You may have some competition for your title, Minato-sensei. If Naruto wants to be Hokage, I'm sure it's only a matter of time before he gets the hat. Kakashi joked in a good-natured sort of way, feeling lighter than he had in years. Watching Naruto beam so blindingly was all the therapy he'd needed. The boy looked like he was on cloud 9, clinging to his father like he never wanted to let go. And really, he didn't. Is that so? Who's to say I'm not going to train him to be my successor in the first place, huh? Minato laughed, bumping elbows with Kakashi as they idly walked. They kept to the empty back streets of Konoha, waiting for the summons that would inevitably be coming. When that time came, Minato would regretfully have to leave Naruto in Kakashi's care. Hopefully not for too long. Naruto gasped aloud at their words. This was the best day of his life. Honestly, if it was a dream, he wasn't going to be all that surprised. His father, the fourth Hokage. It was so insane, even he never would have thought of it. Now for sure they'd stop making fun of him at the academy. If this was somehow legit, then his dad could teach him how to actually throw a kunai and help him study so he'd stop failing tests. Maybe Iruka-sensei would finally treat him like he treated all the other kids in their class. Maybe he could even have friends. Friends and a family. It seemed surreal. He felt greedy and selfish, yearning for it all, but he couldn't very well stop himself. He wondered what the house was like, and if he'd really have a room there. The idea of sitting down and eating dinner with his dad and Kashi seemed amazing. He couldn't think of anything else in the whole world he wanted more. He could just imagine it now. He would actually have a real home to come back to, with actual people in it. And a dad to walk him to the academy and pick him up and put him on his shoulders. Naruto's head was spinning with the possibilities. Was any of that okay? How would Naruto know? It all seemed rather sudden. He'd been an orphan like 5 minutes ago. He's definitely skeptical. Who wouldn't be in a situation like this? Naruto's not exactly the most liked person in the whole wide world, you know. Maybe someone had finally hit him with a rock, and he was in a blissful coma. Believe it, Kashi. We're gonna team up and take you down. Naruto replied heatedly, keeping his worries and wants to himself for the time being in case he scared his new dad off. Minato almost melted, his cheeks turning pink from the sheer cuteness of his son. He wished Kushina were here to see this. Why me? It's not like I want to be Hawkage. Kakashi waved the boy off. Naruto narrowed his eyes at him in a suspicious manner. That's exactly what someone who wants to be Hawkage would say. Believe it? Naruto huffed. He squeezed Minato as best he could. My dad is gonna train me to be the coolest ninja. Even cooler than you, Dad. Minato was going to turn into a puddle. An actual puddle, right here in the middle of the road. Kakashi would have to scrape him up with a giant spatula. So you think I'm cool, then? Kakashi said flippantly. Naruto let out a squawk of denial. The sound was shortly followed by a noise very much similar to the one the boy had just made, though this one came from overhead. They all looked up to see an eagle circling above. It brandished the Hawkage seal around its leg. The sight was enough to make Minato's smile dim. He looked to Kakashi with a nod. He knew it was only a matter of time and that it couldn't be avoided, but he couldn't help but feel nervous. How much had changed? He hoped the council remained the same. Well, maybe he wouldn't be too upset if Danzo weren't there. He hadn't thought to ask if any of the clan heads had changed. He genuinely hoped not. He'd been great friends with most all of them, and gaining their support was something Minato had worked hard for during his time at war. They were all strong-willed and just good. It was rare to have so many clan heads be genuinely good. Naruto's eyes widened when Minato moved to hand him to Kakashi. He liked Kakashi a lot. His dad had joked and said that he was sort of like Naruto's big brother, and Naruto had always wanted one of those. Not that he was going to admit that to Kashi. The guy was too cocky for his own good, Naruto had decided. Still, no matter how much he kinda sorta liked the man, that didn't mean he wanted to be held by anyone aside from his dad. Being picked up in general didn't hold great memories for him, so it was only okay if it was his dad. His dad, who was leaving far, far too soon. He didn't want to let go. Naruto tightened his hold, feeling himself become slightly panicked. What if this was all fake, and his dad actually didn't come back and didn't want Naruto? His throat felt tight thinking about it. Naruto knew crying was for babies, and he had already done it far too much today, but he couldn't stop his eyes from watering. He had just gotten a dad, and now he already had to leave. Naruto still had so many things he had to hurry and do with him, just in case. Like go to the park and play with him, and give him hugs and draw him pictures. Hey, it's okay, Minato assured, seeing Naruto's scared look. The boy loosened his grip on his dad's shirt a little, taking a deep breath as Minato soothed him. I'll be right back. Kakashi is going to take you clothes shopping while I'm visiting with the Hawkage. I have to talk to some people and let them know I'm still alive. That way I can be Hawkage again and get the rights to our house back, so we can live together. Is that all right? Wait, I'm doing what? Kakashi asked. He was ignored. You'll be back, Naruto asked in a skeptical tone. Minato gave a brilliant smile. Always Naruto. He planted a kiss on his son's forehead. The boy's eyes went wide and teary, and he drew back in slight awe. Be good for Kakashi. And pick out some really cool clothes, all right. He was gone after that, not giving his son the chance to get worked up again. Naruto blinked rapidly a few times, whipping around in Kakashi's arms so he could look at the masked man. The headache deflated visibly. He could almost feel his wallet getting lighter. That being said, he had been waiting 6 years to spoil the kid. All right, kid. He adjusted his grip on him, giving a closed-eye smile. Looks like it's just me and you. Let's roll. Naruto's eyes brightened, and he grinned. It isn't possible. Danzo said in a sure sort of way. An emergency meeting had called all the clan heads and council members in. The air in the room was tense, and Minato could already feel himself starting to sweat. Hiruzen remained calm and level-headed, and Minato did his best to follow suit. He'd already given all the necessary evidence. He shared information only he and some others in the room would know, and allowed his chakra to expand out so they could get a better feel for it. He let them try to dispel genjutsu and disrupt transformations and ask over-the-top questions. Most everyone was convinced, if not astonished. Save for Shimura. Naturally, clearly. Shikaku spoke with dry sarcasm. Seeing Minato Namikaze again had been like a breath of fresh air. Though they'd been warned prior to the blonde arriving what had happened and that he was back, it was something else entirely to see it with his own eyes. I vote we reinstate him right away. I think Lord Third's luxurious retirement is long overdue. The third Hawkage gave a chuckle. Indeed, he'd been wishing he could relax for some time now. He wasn't as young as he used to be, after all. Minato gave a nervous smile. He'd been hugged by several individuals upon re-entry. Before his death, all the clan heads had been fully on his side. Even the Hyuga and Uchiha clans had wanted him at the helm of the village. It seemed that hadn't changed. There was palpable relief displayed in Fugaku Uchiha's worn expression, and Hayashi Hyuga looked notably more relaxed. Minato could practically smell his work being cut out for him. I am all for Minato returning as our Hawkage. Koharu smiled, sounding old and a little weary, but relieved to see him. It is a true miracle that he should find himself unharmed and back after so long. Though we may not know how this is possible, I believe we should count our blessings. He is just what our village needs. Danzo turned to look at the woman in complete disbelief, like he couldn't believe he'd been betrayed so blatantly. Tsume Inuzuka turned to the side and tried her best to mask her laughter with a cough. It wasn't done very well based on the look Danzo leveled her with. That only seemed to crack her up more. Even Choza looked like he was maybe going to let loose a chuckle or two. Hiruzen massaged his temples. He knew Danzo would cause a fuss, but that didn't mean he couldn't be annoyed by it. I agree as well. Himura smiled. Danzo turned to him slowly. Shikaku swallowed a snort, looking away very pointedly. Hiruzen shot him a mildly scolding look. Same. Tsume blew out a breath of air. Maybe he can finally bring some order to this place. No disrespect, Lord Third. None taken in Yuzuka-san. It seems we're all in favor of Minato taking the hat back. Hiruzen deflated a little. He was glad. He had very little left in him at this point. We'll begin preparations for the ceremony right away. I think the most crucial part of all this is finding a way to announce to the village that Minato is indeed still alive. It was a good point. They couldn't just spring it out at the ceremony. There had to be some sort of build-up, a warning, if you would, so people wouldn't be shocked or stuck in a state of denial over it. The fourth remained one of the few Hawkages almost everyone had sided with and loved. Excluding Danzo and his supporters, however many few he had. Minato was a war hero who had brought them peace and safety, risking himself daily to go out onto the battlefield for the sake of the village. They'd be delighted he'd returned. But how did they tell them? Shikaku Nara snapped his fingers all of a sudden, grinning in a lazy manner. I know exactly how to trickle the word out. Shikaku Nara did indeed know how to get the word out. All he had to do was drag Inoichi out into the lobby of the Hawkage building and talk loudly about how he couldn't believe Minato was back after 6 years, and how he was so glad the man was somehow still alive. The receptionist soaked the whole thing up like a sponge and immediately started spilling the beans to the next person who came by, who was equally as willing to spread the word. The entire tower seemed to know by the time Minato was actually allowed to leave, gasping and whispering, some even cheering for him as he went by. Talk about effective, if not slightly terrifying. There was no rumor mill like the Konoha rumor mill, he guessed. Minato fiddled with the key to he and Kushina's old home nervously. They hadn't lived together in it very long, only moving out of their shared apartment when they realized Kushina was pregnant. Even still, they'd worked hard to make it as warm and welcoming as they could for their incoming baby. He could still very clearly envision the pictures hanging on the wall and the new furniture they'd splurged on. The corners they'd baby-proofed, and the dog door they'd put in for Kakashi's Ninken, despite the boy's insistence that he wouldn't be imposing enough for it to be necessary. The nursery, colored a soft indigo with images of Shuriken and kunai, painted on carefully by Kushina herself. The thought of seeing it again, covered in dust and unused by the family he'd loved so much, made his throat feel tight. Again, he could imagine Kushina yelling at him and whacking him over the head for his distress. Just because he wasn't going to get what he'd expected didn't mean his family was gone. Kakashi and Naruto were still here, and they still needed him. She would want him to keep his head held high. If he moped too much, she'd definitely give him grief in the afterlife for wasting time. Minato took a deep breath and told himself he'd allow himself to grieve later. He had to get settled here and make sure Naruto and Kakashi were both okay. They all had a lot of adjusting to do, and he was determined to make sure everything went as smoothly as humanly possible. He immediately started the hunt for Kakashi and Naruto in the main shopping district of Konoha, darting around like a madman, trying to sense for his son or student's chakra. He got more than a few startled looks as he jogged along, head scanning back and forth to make sure he didn't miss them by mistake. He offered polite smiles to anyone who happened to meet his eyes, winking when he saw vaguely familiar faces. It was comical to see people stop what they were doing completely and process. Though he did have to admit to feeling guilty watching a nin, who was clearly off-duty, drop his groceries into a couple of heaps at the sight of him. Minato was just going to turn the other way and decide that one wasn't on him. It didn't take long to track down his student and son. Naruto's immense chakra hit before he even saw the pair. What really slowed Minato down, however, was the sudden change in atmosphere the closer he got. Civilians rushed past with ducked heads. Silence edged with whispers ebbed its way into the streets, replacing the usual bustle of sounds you'd usually expect to find on a commercial strip such as this. Minato immediately felt the same anger that had gripped him earlier return in tenfold. His casual stroll turned stiff, and his brows dropped into a tense furrow. Kakashi was chatting amicably with Naruto, holding the boy's hand while hosting at least 11 bags on the other arm. Naruto looked a little nervous, gripping Kakashi's hand with a scared ferocity and forcing himself to smile. The expression would have been entirely convincing had he not seen it on Kushina's face a million times when they were both younger. Kakashi was far more open about how he felt, his cheerful expression breaking every so often so he could shoot venomous glares at anyone who whispered too loudly or stared a little too long. Minato felt a wave of fondness crash through him at the sight of his student's protectiveness. It wasn't much, but it was a small breath of relief to see that Naruto at least didn't have to deal with this alone. Not anymore. Minato smoothed out his expression, wishing more than anything that he had his coat. He'd never once wanted to flaunt his position as the fourth Hokage before. The power that came with the title wasn't something he'd ever held over someone's head, and the attention he used to get when he went out into public had been embarrassing and a little flattering before. Now he wanted people to know who he was. Wanted to stake his claim and let the world know that this was his son, and that anyone messing with him was messing with Minato too. That if anyone looked at him sideways again, Minato would take it as a personal insult, one that would not be met kindly. Naruto Kakashi. He chirped cheerfully. Naruto whipped around, eyes going wide like he was shocked to see that Minato had come back. The genuine look of exuberance that broke out across his son's face was everything. He was starting to see just how desperately he needed to invest in a camera. Minato spun the house key on his finger a few times for them to see. "Look what I've got, Dad." Naruto gasped out almost reverently, like he couldn't believe Minato was there and walking towards him. He hesitantly let go of Kakashi's hand, looking up at the masked man to see if it was okay. Kakashi swallowed the coup that threatened to wiggle up his throat, nodding to the blonde. Naruto looked completely floored by the permission. Exhilarated, he turned and darted for his dad, who was all too willing to open his arms and receive him. Minato's heart felt light, lighter than it had since he'd first woken up in that clearing. The whispers stopped abruptly as Minato caught Naruto in his arms, spinning them around once to absorb the momentum the little boy had brought when he crashed into him. Naruto let out a hysterical laugh, hugging his dad as though seeing him again was the best thing to ever happen to him. Kakashi grinned as he approached, distributing half of the bags he'd gotten into the hand Naruto had abandoned. Minato raised an amused brow at the sight. Kakashi shrugged. He needed clothes. The headache said dryly. Minato laughed. I'll reimburse you as soon as they give me my bank account back. Minato said lightly. Naruto pulled back, grinning at his dad. Kashi even got me new kunai for the academy, new. Naruto said, trying to shake his father back and forth, but only succeeding in rocking himself. He was pretty much vibrating with excitement. And he said he'd teach me how to throw them. Like for real. Minato's smile thinned slightly. He shot a glance at Kakashi, who was conveniently looking away. A huff of laughter left him. Sounds like Kashi is trying to steal you from me already. Minato spun on his heel, heading away from the stairs and towards their house. Kakashi scoffed and moved to follow, falling into step next to his sensei. What else did you get? We'll have to go pick paint out for your room later, too. Naruto looked awed by the idea. Pick out paint? For his room? Today couldn't possibly be happening. He was going to wake up any minute now in the same dingy apartment and eat the same instant ramen he always did. And then he'd sit alone and contemplate going outside, and then decide not to because he didn't want to get yelled at. That's what was going to happen, that's what always did. Gazing at his dad, he remained in perpetual disbelief. How could someone like him possibly be related to someone so amazing? He felt solemn thinking about it, him. With the fourth Hokage for a father. When he thought about it like that, anyone would laugh. Today was unlike anything Naruto had ever experienced. He wondered if this was what was normal for other kids. Shopping trips to get the things they needed, and a feeling of love so strong it threatened to blossom out of his chest. He can almost understand Kashi's affection better than he can his dad's. Kakashi has been his shadow for a long time now. For as long as Naruto can remember, actually. Watching him, bringing him gifts, and tucking him in. Fixing basic things around his apartment, he suspects, like his leaky faucet and light fixture. How can his dad just come here and decide to love him without knowing him? Does he know what Naruto is, that he's different? Will he change his mind if he does? Maybe Naruto is being presumptuous. His dad said he loves him, but what if he doesn't really? How does Naruto know for sure? Minato seemed to notice the sobering of his son, his smile dropping a little. He looked to Kakashi for answers. The copycat nin looked just as confused as he did, shrugging cluelessly as Naruto's grip on his father's shirt loosened a little. It was heartbreaking to see doubt spread across his child's face. He wished he could bundle Naruto up and never let go. Minato wasn't going to let him get hurt anymore if he had anything to say about it. Hey, Naruto murmured quietly, his voice impossibly small. He glanced at his father's face, almost as though afraid he'd get in trouble for asking. This is real, right? Minato sucked in a sharp breath of air. He smiled, even if he wanted to find the nearest tree so he could punch a hole straight through it. Yes, Naruto. Minato tightened his grip on him. This is real. I know things are hectic and it came out of nowhere, but you'll see. Things are going to be different now. I promise. Naruto didn't quite look convinced, but the boy was smiling and rushing off on another tangent about he and Kakashi's adventures before Minato could dwell on it too much longer. Minato had expected to be sadder, coming back to the house. But how could it be when Naruto dropped out of his arms and ran into the open living room, spinning around and kicking up a cloud of thick dust in his wake? His eyes were shining so brightly, so happily. He lit up the entire space, just like Minato always knew he would, and the man couldn't do much but stand there and watch as he took it all in. Naruto's big eyes traced every nook and cranny of the space, his little head whipping back and forth when new details would catch his eye. He beamed, staring at his father with open awe and thrill that made him look like he was glowing. The joy is so blatant it would be criminal not to smile back. Minato can already see the life they're going to have. Naruto running around with reckless abandon, tracking mud inside and throwing kunai in the house even though Minato will tell him not to. He can see the dirty paw prints Kakashi's Ninken will leave once he convinces the young man to stop cooping them up in that apartment of his, as Minato is sure his masked student hasn't moved since his death. He can imagine game nights and pillow forts, and dinners eaten in the living room because they've covered the dining room table with too much junk that needs organizing. Minato looks at his son and the house they now share, and he can see the years spread out like a road map. It's therapeutic. Am I really allowed to live here? Naruto gasps, looking away from his dad and returning to his inspection of the area. Minato can't stop his smile, his shoulders losing the tension they'd previously held. Kakashi walked past him with ease, dropping the bags by the door and smiling. After we clean it up a little, Kakashi allowed, ruffling the kid's hair. Minato shook his head a little. Exactly. And there's no time like the present, so let's get at it. Minato raised his fist. Naruto threw his hands up and whooped. There are still cleaning supplies under the sink. Naruto tackles the countertops with reckless abandon. There's still running water and electricity, though a lot of the light bulbs flicker oddly from disuse. Kakashi sends a clone of himself off to go retrieve some more. Minato can't help but feel impressed by his ability to hold a solid clone so easily. Naruto also seems particularly fascinated by the technique, watching Kakashi's hands move and gasping at the copy of him that emerges from the produced cloud of smoke. He looks even more shocked when it opens a door by itself and darts off. They focus on the main area. Minato doesn't think he's ready to touch the bedrooms yet. Naruto doesn't ask either, sticking to the main living area dutifully. He beats the life out of the couch's throw pillows, causing several allergy attacks. The boy just cackles and carries on with it, rolling around on the actual couch cushions in order to get the dust off. He dirties his clothes in the process, but such is to be expected of a child his age. Kakashi pulls a camera out to snap a few pictures. Minato's gratefulness is infinite. He can almost see the many scrapbooks that will be made in his mind's eye. Naruto seems to be the only one of the trio not completely worn out after cleaning. He's still teeming with energy, bouncing off the walls and talking about half a dozen things at once. Minato can't be anything other than fond of the boy, watching him make extravagant motions with his hands from his place, wedged between Kakashi and his dad. The blonde has already declared that Kakashi will live here, obviously. Kakashi had opened his mouth several times to say he already had an apartment, only to be cut off every single time. It's as hilarious as it is effective. Minato could never get Kakashi to concede to moving in. Naruto convinces him within 15 minutes. "Ma, I hope you like dogs, Naruto." Kakashi patted the boy's head as though he were one. "I have quite a few." Naruto whipped towards him, eyes sparkling. Kakashi got the distinct impression that he'd just sealed his fate. The weekend went too fast, spent bonding and cleaning up the bedrooms. Kakashi and Naruto had taken up doing that for the most part, leaving Minato to deal with the other parts of the house, so he wouldn't have to watch them dismantle the nursery he and Kushina had never gotten to experience. Naruto was all too willing to help out, rushing about with various cleaning supplies, simply happy to be included. It was a rewarding process. It felt like they were breathing new life into the house, bringing it back up to par. It was strangely hopeful. Minato was sure there was a metaphor buried in there somewhere, but he had no idea where. Kakashi had brought his Ninken out near the tail end to meet Naruto as a reward for all his hard work. After they'd finished leaping all over Minato, they'd turned to his son with gusto. Naruto's blue eyes had gone impossibly wide, a gasp of absolute awe slipping past his lips as they wagged their tails and cocked their heads at him with open curiosity. By the end of it, Kakashi wasn't even sure he could really call them his Ninken anymore. They followed Naruto any and everywhere the boy went. If the blonde boy decided he was going to run across the living room and rifle around the kitchen cabinets, you could bet there'd be 7 sets of paws scurrying after him across the hardwood floor. Pakun was the only one who didn't race after him, but that was probably because Naruto seldom ever put the pug down. Kakashi found it too cute to feel all that betrayed. Minato didn't share the sentiment. His son had just been stolen from him by a pack of supercharged chakra mutts. His ego was never going to recover. They didn't get out too much unless it was to explore the expansive backyard. If they needed anything from town, Kakashi sent a clone or went himself. He was helpful like that, wanting to do anything possible to contribute. His sensei was still adjusting to this new life, coping with his son's age and all he missed out on, and with the loss of Kushina. It was a lot to get used to. Even Kakashi still couldn't believe it, sometimes unable to stop himself from zoning out just staring at his sensei. Kakashi's heart had never felt fuller. He knew sometimes all it could take was a second for everything to turn around, but this was just, he'd never had luck like this before. Sometimes it felt like bad thing after bad thing haunted Kakashi. Sometimes he wondered if he was the cause. He was the common denominator, wasn't he? He got close to someone and suddenly they'd die, his dad and then Obaido and then Rin, and then Sensei and Kushina. Except he'd come back. So maybe Kakashi wasn't as cursed as he'd grown to think. The news that Minato was back and alive spread like wildfire throughout Konoha. Kakashi heard it everywhere he went. Spirits were noticeably lifted, people unfurling like blooming flowers at the thought of their esteemed fourth Hokage returning. Minato was powerful and kind and everything they'd ever wanted in a leader. His loss had devastated everyone and brought a sense of insecurity down upon the village. It felt like their safety had returned, blanketing them all in a relief they desperately needed. Minato Namikaze had returned from beyond the grave. He'd risen above it all. Not even the great Kyuubi no Kitsune could keep him down. Even after years of absence, he had made his way back to them and was ready to lead them again. It was everything they ever could have dreamed of. A true miracle even 6 years later. There was some disbelief, but it was dashed quickly. Shikaku spread rumors as was necessary, and the Hokage made a few public statements that weaseled their way into the daily papers and onto the few radio stations Konoha had. Talk of a ceremony to celebrate his return to life rushed across the village like a crashing tidal wave. People were already planning, decorations and banners being strung throughout the streets to let their yondaime know how happy they were to welcome him back. The warm reception seemed village-wide from what Kakashi understood. Kakashi was glad. Minato didn't need any unnecessary stress. Naruto stayed home from the academy Monday, bursting into a fit of hysterical sobs when Minato said he had to go to the Hokage's office whilst he was at school to get caught up on current affairs and plan his reinstatement ceremony as the fourth. Naruto had wailed, saying he didn't want his dream to be over and that he didn't want to lose his dad. Minato had just about gone into cardiac arrest, bundling his son up in his arms and softly telling him that they were both going to rebel and skip out. Naruto's look of hopeful disbelief had made his chest ache. He'd looked to Kakashi with desperation of his own. His masked student had looked just as out of depth as Minato felt. They all stayed at the house that day, Kakashi brushing off his Anbu duties readily. Minato showed Naruto how to properly throw a kunai, stunned at how fast he was able to get it down. It had taken Minato a moment to explain it. He had to show him and correct his hold, and explain in a slow manner, and show him how to do it a few times. Naruto watched with rapt attention before throwing a kunai on his own. It hadn't gotten anywhere near the target, but that didn't seem to dissuade his son. He learned much in the same way Kushina had. Trial, error, and observation. It was the only way he seemed to know how to work through things, looking to his dad a few times for help when he forgot something. Memorization wasn't his thing. His attention span simply didn't allow for it. That, however, did not mean Naruto was stupid. It didn't take him very long before he was landing a bullseye practically every time, jumping from foot to foot exuberantly at his own success. Minato was in awe. His son was clearly a genius. A total prodigy. He didn't learn the same way most did, but boy did he learn fast when you explained it right. Once it clicked, it was in there. Minato was ridiculously giddy over the discovery. As though Naruto couldn't be any more amazingly perfect. Minato was convinced that he was the best, smartest 5-year-old to ever grace the planet. He went through a mental run-through of every child he'd ever met, but couldn't come up with a single one that even came relatively close to Naruto. He was the cutest kid, the smartest, and the most amazing by far. There was simply no competition. It was stunning. "You're the best dad in the whole wide world," Naruto said in a short tone, clinging to his dad. He liked to be near his dad as often as possible, tucking himself into the man's side and trailing after him. Minato loved it more than anything else in the whole entire world. He almost wanted to say no to being Hokage just so he could spend every waking hour of the day with his son. Even if that meant following him to the academy. A little pathetic, but Naruto was just everything. His whole entire existence. "And you're the best son in the whole wide world." Minato cooed at him, squeezing him as he maneuvered around the Ninken, all patiently waiting for him to put Naruto back down. Comically enough, Kakashi was actually being forced to move in because of the stubborn canines. They refused to leave and go back to the cramped apartment. Kakashi kept them in after meeting Naruto and experiencing the large backyard. Naruto was overjoyed, though, so really it all worked out. Speaking of, Naruto had been sleeping in Minato's bed with the man ever since he came back, and took great joy in crawling up next to Kakashi every morning to wake him up. Naruto soaked up physical affection like a sponge. Getting cuddled by Kakashi like he was a teddy bear was something he enjoyed immensely. He was clearly touch-starved. Minato and Kakashi were more than willing to make up for all the hugs he'd missed out on. "What am I? Chopped liver? Speak of the devil." Kakashi shoved his hands in his pockets, waiting patiently as Minato swiped Naruto's backpack off the couch. It was brand new, and the brightest, gaudiest shade of orange any of them had ever seen. It hurt a little to look at it, but Minato didn't mind. Kushina had been all about bright colors, so seeing how much Naruto liked them as well made his heart swell. He would buy Naruto as much orange as he wanted. If anyone deserved it, it was him. In getting to know his son these past few days, Minato had learned just how much Naruto had been deprived of. There were things he hadn't gotten to experience, basic things that every child was worthy of. Minato and Kakashi were going to make sure he got all that and more. "Might as well be, boss." Pakun had turned against Kakashi completely. The masked cop in put a hand over his heart in mock hurt. Naruto let out a laugh. "Yeah." Naruto threw his little fists up in the air, blue eyes shining. Minato let out a laugh of his own, grinning so hard it hurt. He hoped Kushina was watching this from wherever she was. "Don't worry, Kashi. I still think you're really cool. Even if you're not as cool as the doggies." Said doggies immediately began to wag their tails, glancing at Kakashi with a shameless amount of smugness. Save for Bull, who really had no idea what was happening. He was just happy to be here. Kakashi let out a sigh, shaking his head a little in exasperation. Naruto beamed at him, feeling more ready to tackle school after his dad's comforts. It had been a few days, and his dad was still here. He had even taken yesterday off, for him. He hadn't even hesitated. Like at all, even slightly. Naruto hadn't meant to freak out, in all fairness. He just panicked, that was all. It had felt like everything was coming to an end, and he'd cried. He wasn't trying to cause problems, really. It had just happened. Minato had promised to take Naruto to school, and Kakashi had sworn to pick him up. Naruto had been perhaps a little reluctant. He didn't want to admit that his experiences at the academy weren't the best. Being a tattletale or complainer would make his dad not like him, and Naruto really didn't want that. What if they made him go back to the apartment, or didn't want him anymore? His chest felt tight when he thought about what his dad would do when he found out Naruto wasn't normal. He'd already seen it a little bit, the way the villagers didn't like him. What if he eventually didn't like him either? The simple fact of the matter was that, dad or not, Naruto was a monster. A demon child, they all said. Why would they all say it if it wasn't true on some level? What if his dad realized that? Moreover, what if he got mad that Naruto had kept it from him? Not to mention that his grades were awful. He hadn't had the courage to tell his dad. Sometimes when he read, the words jumbled, and he didn't always understand what Iruka-sensei was saying. He talked fast and wrote even faster, flitting from topic to topic too quickly for Naruto to keep up. He'd tried to ask before, but he knew Sensei didn't like him. He looked at him just like the villagers did, with clear distaste and lips curled in disgust, though he tried hard not to let it show. Naruto did his best not to bother him. He didn't want to get yelled at any more than he already did. They were a little late to the academy. Naruto fidgeted outside the building, one hand clutching his dad's and the other focused on holding Pakun. The rest of the Ninkin had been forced to stay behind. Kakashi had agreed to let him take the pug to school with him, winking in a conspiring sort of way that made Naruto's shoulders slouch with relief. Truth be told, the pug was going solely to help the boy understand his schoolwork better and keep an eye on things. Provide Naruto with moral support and observe. He was supposed to keep himself, and his ability to talk fluently on the down low to ensure he didn't get himself kicked out early on. Pakun had accepted the mission with a dutiful nod and moody snort. I'll see you after school, Naruto. Kakashi is going to bring you straight to me. Minato promised, smile strained. He wished he could just carry Naruto around with him everywhere. He was small enough for it, all right. Naruto trailed off, glancing down at the pug in his arms. Pakun gave a doggish smile that made him relax a little. He took a deep breath, nodding. He was Naruto Uzumaki. He could totally handle this. He had every day before, and now it was going to be even better. He had a badass dad and a brand new big brother, or maybe uncle of sorts. He didn't really know what Kashi was, and now a really cute doggy to help him. Giving up before he'd even started would just be sad. And Naruto Uzumaki. He didn't do sad, not anymore. Believe it. Things were going to be awesome. They already were. He was being picky, and that wasn't very cool. Pakun was extra smart. He'd definitely help Naruto out. His doubts could wait until later. It was best to take things one at a time. He could have his full-scale mental breakdown after school or something. Pakun will watch out for you. I'll tell you all about my super-secret Hawkage stuff as soon as we get home. Minato winked, grinning. Naruto grinned back, feeling lighter already. His dad really was the best dad in the world. Naruto didn't deserve it. As long as you promise not to tell anyone, of course. What do you take me for? I won't tell anyone, believe it. Naruto announced loudly, capturing his dad's leg in a tight hug. Minato ruffled his hair as the boy pulled back, grinning. Pakun and I are gonna ace it. Just you wait. Minato laughed, waving at him as he took off like the wind, cradling his canine companion carefully. Pakun seemed entirely content, free of his ninja headband, and instead donning a plain orange vest as a disguise. He was going undercover, according to Kakashi, and the pug was taking his new duties on with relish. As funny as it was, Minato and Kakashi were dead serious at the same time, and the Ninkin knew that. Naruto clearly wasn't getting the extra help he needed, and if he was being mistreated, Minato wanted to know. Pakun would be able to tell him everything he needed to know and more. Naruto crashed through the door of the classroom loudly, sporting new attire that he hadn't fished out of a donation bin. This stuff actually fit, and his backpack wasn't falling apart at the seams anymore. Iruka stopped mid-sentence, brows raising as Naruto beamed at them all wildly. The boy was visibly brighter than usual, his smile less strained. The pug sitting in his arms was new. It looked relatively grumpy, its eyes a little too sharp and knowing. Iruka lowered his piece of chalk a tad, as the rest of the class stared blandly at their boisterous classmate. They'd hoped he would be gone again today. Clearly, that had been wishful thinking. Most of the students didn't really have a real issue with Naruto, but a lot of them had been told not to associate. The guy wasn't the brightest. He was loud and abrasive. The only ones who didn't really seem to mind him were Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba. They were willing to treat him just like you'd treat anyone, though they still didn't tend to hang out with him all that often even so. They all blinked at Naruto, Shikamaru and Choji sharing a look at the new appearance. Clearly something had happened over the weekend. Something good from the looks of it. Shikamaru felt himself smile a little. He'd always worried about Naruto a little, but maybe this was a sign things would finally change for the guy. Iruka tried to treat Naruto like the rest of the students, but even he couldn't deny that he tended to ignore the boy. Looking at him was a scathing reminder of what he'd gone through as a child, losing both his parents to the fox and growing up an orphan. Naruto was loud and obnoxious, disrupting class every chance he got. His grades were atrocious to boot, showing a severe lack of effort. Iruka had tried a few times to explain to him how to do it, but all he got was a blank stare in return. It sparked an unnatural amount of frustration in him. He couldn't allow himself to take any of it out on him. Ignoring him was better than being harsh, Iruka had decided. He pushed down his frustrations. He had to be as fair as possible. Despite his negligence, even he was able to see the difference in Naruto. Kiba let out a little gasp. Hey. He pointed an accusing finger. When did you get a ninkin? You're not an Inuzuka. Naruto grinned, hugging Pakun, who was a million times cuter than Akamaru, by the way. The pug leveled Kiba with a tired, flat stare that had him shriveling backwards slightly and furrowing his brows in confusion. Naruto marched into the room like he owned it, confident as he always seemed to be, though this time with a bit more bounce. Naruto held the pug out for the entire room to see, raising him up. Pakun didn't complain, letting Naruto show him off and preening perhaps the smallest of amounts. Iruka pressed his lips together and swallowed the urge to raise his voice, taking in a deep breath through his nose. This is Pakun. He's my new buddy, Naruto declared with a grin. Iruka sighed heavily. Naruto, sit down. His voice held a snap that had the pug's gaze zeroing in on him in seconds. Iruka could tell immediately that he wasn't just any old dog. Where had Naruto gotten it, however? Surely if he'd stolen a ninkin, it would know to run away. You can't just bring animals to class, Naruto. You have to have paperwork done for that, and he has to be a special kind of dog. A ninja animal. Naruto visibly deflated as he slunk down into his seat, sinking down into it as his classmates snickered at him. Pakun gave Iruka a nasty snarl, chakra flaring threateningly to let him know that he was indeed a ninja animal. He was small, but that only meant he was closer to hell, and a lot more dangerous where ankles were involved. Naruto huffed a little, glaring at his teacher in a way that made Iruka's stomach flip with his own bout of frustration. Naruto normally wouldn't look at his teacher like that, but he was insulting Pakun. Pakun was something called an OG, that meant original gangster. And you couldn't disrespect those according to him. My dad said I could. And he knows everything. Naruto insisted, sitting up a little straighter. Iruka stared at him incredulously. The class went dead silent, staring at Naruto with open disbelief. The boy deflated somewhat. He said it was fine. He'll fill out the forms for me. It came out quieter than he'd meant it to, but still insistent. Uruka let out a heavy sigh. Naruto felt his confidence die a little at the sound, nervously glancing around and wondering if maybe he shouldn't have agreed to bring Pakun with him. He hugged the dog a little tighter, pushing down his tears of frustration because he's not a crybaby who cries at the drop of a hat, believe it. He knew everyone knew he was an orphan, but his dad really was back. He was. And he'd said it was a great idea to bring Pakun. His dad was the fourth Hawkage. That meant he was super smart, super qualified, and knew literally everything ever. All the time. Uruka-sensei couldn't even begin to compare. Naruto, it's not becoming of a ninja in training to lie, he said, trying to keep his frustration from his voice. Pakun climbed up onto the desk. Ino, who was stuck sitting next to the boisterous blonde at the moment, scooted away a little as the dog growled. Pakun reminded himself that he wasn't supposed to talk. He wasn't supposed to. I don't know where you got this dog, but you need, all right, forget it, whatever. Pakun wasn't going to just watch Naruto get treated like this. Not on his watch. He could be undercover and talk. Damn whatever Kakashi had advised. Quit spouting out nonsense, as though you know what you're talking about, brat. Pakun's deep, gravelly voice was enough to snap Uruka's mouth shut. He stared in disbelief at the dog. Kiba gasped. He could talk so well. How was that possible? Even his mom's Ninken couldn't talk that well. Akamaru hadn't even said his first word yet. Where had Naruto found this one? The forms are being filled out as we speak. Put a sock in it now, and I might let you touch my poor pads. He held up his paw to display the squishy pink beans beneath. Naruto had a great time massaging them, as he should. Pakun went to great lengths to keep them so soft. Uruka's face drained of color. His mouth snapped shut with an audible clack of teeth. The silence that pervaded the classroom was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Naruto shriveled back slightly, deciding that Pakun was a badass that Naruto probably didn't deserve as a friend and companion. His teacher opened his mouth to say something. Pakun flashed his teeth before he got the chance, 2 rows ready to latch onto the man's ankle with a chakra-enhanced bite and not let go until the guy's foot was off. Uruka seemed to sense the threat because his mouth closed again, his shoulders tense. He wisely didn't say anything else after that. Pakun thought that made the blow to his cover worth it. Naruto was ignored for the most part. Whispered about vaguely, but the blonde boy cheerfully ignored it whilst laboring hard at his schoolwork. Pakun watched him try to work through it, tapping his arm with his paw anytime he started to stray. Naruto would stop and stare at the issue, and then look at Uruka's problem on the board, and then look back again. It was a slow-going process. His classmates were already far surpassing him, scribbling down the answers with ease and asking their neighbors for help whenever necessary. Pakun simply hummed to himself a little, watching Naruto slowly work through the first problem at a pace equivalent to a snail's. What kind of math were they trying to teach kids these days? They were like 5. They were on some sort of addition. The long kind that forced you to carry. Overall, it shouldn't have been all too hard. Naruto still struggling, losing count every so often or jumbling things up without meaning to. Pakun let him work through it and only stepped in when strictly needed. Naruto wouldn't ever learn if he held his hand the entire time. It was nice that, even with his struggles, Naruto didn't actually seem to want his constant help, stubbornly resisting asking unless he was truly stumped. He was quite determined to get this on his own and to truly learn. Pakun was glad the kid had drive. Naruto finished his first math problem proudly, looking down at Pakun with wide, hopeful eyes. Pakun usually wasn't big on kids. They were grabby brats who were too obnoxious for their own good. Naruto had proved himself to be an exception. In what way, Pakun wasn't sure, but he and the rest of the pack adored the kid after only a few days of knowing him. He was the cutest pup Pakun had ever seen. Loud, sure, but most young tended to be. At least he appreciated how hard Pakun worked to keep his coarse coat feeling silky and soft. Maybe it was the blonde's blatant flattery, or the way he carried Pakun everywhere with him. The pug was going to bite anyone who messed with the boy either way. "Good work, kid," Pakun praised quietly. Naruto let out a small gasp as the dog offered forth his paw, taking it carefully and squishing at his paw pads lightly. Pakun nodded in satisfaction as the blonde vibrated in his seat, hugging the pug slightly in his excitement before tackling the next problem on his page with newfound vigor. Pakun felt his pride swell. They had such a smart pup. That's what was expected of Minato's son, he supposed. He couldn't wait to tell Boss the good news when he came to get them later. Naruto was learning at an exceptional rate. He wasn't as far behind as they'd originally worried he might be. Naruto took on question 2 with fresh confidence, only messing up a few times before he got it. It was much smoother sailing from there on out. He blazed through the assignment so fast his pencil was practically smoking, only having to stop when he accidentally mixed his numbers up. If Pakun had eyebrows, he would have raised them at the sheer speed. Personally, Pakun couldn't wait to let Minato know all about how well the pup had done, and tattle on his teacher, who was very clearly avoiding Naruto. His classmates weren't much better, sometimes shooting glares at him and giggling in the cruel way most children did. Naruto seemed too used to it to notice. Pakun couldn't say he was a fan of that. He wondered how much trouble he'd get into for biting a child. Surely not too much, right? Maybe he'd get the chance to find out. They broke for lunch after a few basic lectures and activities Naruto had to do with Pakun for lack of a group to work with. Naruto had raised his hands a few times in class, and Pakun took note that Iruka completely ignored him when he did. Didn't even bother trying to call on him, even if he was the only one with his hand up. What was worse was that Naruto didn't seem perturbed in the least, continuing to raise his hand despite having to know on some level that his teacher wouldn't pick him. Pakun felt a fair amount of dislike beginning to form for the teacher, adding on to the sourness that was already there. It was a nasty and dark feeling that he didn't bother pushing away. Kids spilled out into the courtyard to enjoy their food in the nice weather. Naruto scurried out after them, not really wanting to stay in the classroom with Iruka-sensei. He could feel his teacher's eyes drilling holes into his back as he went, dragging his new bag along with him. He darted around the back of the school before the pug in his arms could say much of anything about the fact, beelining for a spot between 2 large bushes that looked shady and plenty big enough for a boy Naruto's size to sit. The blonde boy dove into the space, settling familiarly and grinning at Pakun as he carefully set the dog down. The pug stretched, rolling his head about to try and crack his neck. Who knew school could be so taxing? "This is where I sit when the courtyard's too crowded," Naruto announced boldly, dragging his backpack towards him and pulling it open. Pakun watched him dig through it, his blue eyes bright. "Normally, I don't really have food, so I try to do my schoolwork, but I got it all done today thanks to you. I didn't know dogs could be so smart. Maybe it's just you and the rest of Kashi's puppies. Since you're Pakun and the puppies and they're just like dogs. You're all way, way cooler than them. I bet Kiba's so jealous. Since you're cuter than Akamaru. I hope you can come with me every single day. I like having a friend in class." Pakun wondered how he could stand to keep smiling with how awfully he was treated. It was truly awe-inspiring. Naruto continued to babble conversationally, and Pakun was overwhelmed by the wave of affection that washed over him. He truly adored this kid. He was bright and sunny, and everything Pakun wasn't, but genuinely the sweetest kid he'd ever had the pleasure of working with. He had no idea how anyone could possibly stand to be mean to the kid. Just the thought of seeing him even slightly sad made Pakun's heart hurt. This mission was without a doubt the most important thing he'd ever done in his time as a ninkin. He would have to take his duties even more seriously than he thought. Naruto ate the lunch Minato had put together for him with vigor, looking like he might cry as he gazed down at the bento box that had been made with him in mind. He slipped a few pieces of meat out of his lunch and into Pakun's dog bowl, promising not to tattle to Kakashi about it. Pakun had slurped them up and decided that loyalty could definitely be bought. He'd have to apologize to the boss later and put in his official letter of resignation. His allegiances had shifted severely after today. To be fair, Kakashi seemed just as taken as his Ninken were. Nobody came and looked for them, and Naruto didn't mind. Pakun was relieved, resting his head on his paws as Naruto talked and then talked some more, about everything and nothing at all. It didn't bother Pakun all that much. Naruto didn't expect him to reply, only pausing sometimes so the pug could give a grunt of acknowledgement before he'd rattle off about something or another. The kid devoured his food like he was afraid it would vanish if he didn't get it down fast enough. He seemed extremely content to just sit there with Pakun and talk. Like that was all he needed to be happy and nothing more. The rest of the day flew by with Naruto doing great on his work all the way. The one subject that really stumped him was reading. Pakun could practically see the cogs in his brain stop turning the moment his eyes landed on the chunk of text. His brows furrowed as though he were in pain, frustration sparking in his eyes the longer he stared. The thing was, Pakun could tell how hard he was trying to compute what he was seeing. He simply didn't seem to get it, muttering the lines to himself under his breath slowly. Pakun could hear him twisting his words around, and it occurred to him right then that Naruto probably had dyslexia or something of the sort that he needed extra help with. That had to be why he'd been making mistakes in math as well, writing the wrong numbers down by accident and thus getting the wrong results. Writing down 21 instead of 12, and swapping the letters D and B and similar mistakes. That had to be it, didn't it? Some sort of dysgraphia or dyscalculia. Pakun helped Naruto sound out words quietly. The only one who seemed to notice was Kiba, his heightened hearing picking up on the extra help. He didn't say a word. Pakun decided the Inuzuka wasn't all that bad in that sense. So long as his pup companion knew Pakun was the new king of this hill. Naruto listened with rapt attention to everything the pug said. It made helping him a lot easier. The blonde's ability to focus on one thing for an increased period of time was certainly stunted, but he was determined to get this down. He wanted to make his dad and Kashi both proud. He had to get better grades and be an awesome ninja. He wasn't the first one out of the room like he normally tended to be at the end of the day. Iruka dismissed them all, but Naruto was almost done. It was the first time he'd ever felt the urge to stay in his seat and focus. The words were all still weird and mashed together, and sometimes he wrote his letters in the wrong order, but he was getting it. Actually getting it. Pakun was super smart and knew exactly what to do, believe it. He was more patient than any dog Naruto had ever met. He was going to have to insist Kashi buy him loads of that conditioner. He liked so much to keep his coat nice and soft. Maybe he'd even let Naruto give him a bath as thanks. Iruka's attention zeroed in on Naruto when the boy made no moves of leaving, continuing to sit there and work. His assignments were normally turned in relatively blank, a few scribbles of weak attempts jotted down in the boy's messy writing. Iruka's attention dropped to the paper, brows raising when he saw that the boy had actually made it to the back side of the page. He wasn't working fast per se, but he was certainly doing it. What had changed? Something clearly had. The only thing Iruka could think of was. His ears strained. Without the chatter of the rest of the students, he could hear the soft murmurs coming from the suspicious pug the Jinchuriki had dragged in. Iruka's eyes widened when he realized that his dog had to be helping him. As in, Naruto had brought a Ninken in with the intent to cheat. How had Iruka not seen it sooner? It appeared to be working as well. Iruka never would have thought of something like that, but it was clear that's what was going on. Naruto suddenly showing a stark improvement when he was struggling so hard before. That dog was talking to him, telling him how to do it. Iruka had no idea where it had come from or why it was helping him, but it wasn't okay. That paired with the lie about his dad this morning. Uruka took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He knew Naruto struggled with his work, but that was no excuse to bring a ninja dog in to feed him the answers. He'd have to look back at the math assignment he'd handed in today, too. He hadn't bothered to glance over it, but he was willing to bet that was done, too. Uruka marched up to the boy resolutely, stopping in front of his desk. Naruto didn't notice at first, still carefully penciling in answers. It definitely looked like he was copying something that had been told to him. Uruka did his best to keep down his frustration, watching the grumpy pug nudge Naruto's arm to get his attention. Uruka met the dog's glare head-on. The blond boy's head shot up, his wide blue eyes blinking innocently up at Uruka. The brunette teacher took yet another deep breath, steeling himself. He had to be mature about this. He was determined not to lose it, even with how unacceptable this was. He had to detach Naruto from the Kyuubi and do his job as a teacher. "Naruto," he started, voice firm. The boy flinched, brows furrowing as his sensei snatched his nearly finished assignment away from him. Naruto drew himself back immediately, arms wrapping around Pakun, who glared at the teacher. Uruka's eyes scanned over the problems. He frowned, glancing back up at the boy, brow cocking. "You know the policy we have on cheating. I expected better of you. I know you have trouble in class, but that isn't an excuse." Naruto's mouth fell open, his eyes widening in absolute horror. Pakun let out an audible growl at the accusation, not saying anything about how tightly Naruto squeezed him. The blond boy seemed completely taken aback, maybe even offended by the idea. And good. He should be. This was wildly inappropriate to assume, and wrong to boot. Pakun felt his frustration start to simmer. He had been doing this teacher's job all day. He wasn't giving Naruto the answers. He was helping him understand how to get them, which was what Uruka should have been doing this entire time. "I didn't cheat, Uruka-sensei, honest." Naruto moved to swipe the paper back so he could show him, but was stopped dead in his tracks by the look on his sensei's face. He was looking at him with those eyes again, and the blonde knew immediately that this wasn't a fight he was going to win. It never was with Uruka-sensei, was it? That didn't stop tears of frustration from springing up into his eyes. He'd worked so hard all day. He'd done his very best, just so Pakun could give a good report back to his dad and Kashi. He wanted to bring his grades up and learn like the other kids and be normal. What if Uruka-sensei told his dad he'd cheated? What if his dad believed him? The thought alone was almost enough to send Naruto spiraling into a fit of absolute panic. He felt sick to his stomach as Uruka glowered down at him, pursing his lips like he was trying to decide just what to do with him. Naruto stared at him with watery eyes that begged him to believe he was telling the truth. He really had done his very best. He had forced himself to focus even when his thoughts strayed, and he had done his best to follow Pakun's advice and find the mistakes he made. He'd fixed them all on his own. He was finally getting it. Uruka-sensei couldn't just. "You've never performed like this before, Naruto," Uruka said with a sense of finality. Naruto stared at him in horror. "Not until you brought that ninkin in. Him giving you the answers isn't okay. It's unfair to your other classmates who worked hard to do their assignments honestly." He kept his voice level, but Naruto still jolted. The boy felt like he couldn't breathe. He knew he was a slow learner, but just because he finally understood something didn't mean he'd cheated. He did all those problems on his own. Pakun only told him when he wrote something wrong or sounded it out wrong. He didn't count for him or read it to him. Naruto had done it, he had. Kiba sometimes struggled, and he didn't get in trouble for getting the same help from Sensei. Why was Naruto going to get in trouble for getting help too? "Pakun was just helping me, Sensei," he squeaked out, voice held hostage by the tears he was barely able to hold back. "I promise I worked really hard this time, believe it." "I wouldn't, Naruto." Uruka snapped. The straw that broke the camel's back. Pakun let out a snarl, teeth snapping with a viciousness he didn't normally display. It was rare he lost his cool, but he couldn't much help himself. He basked in the satisfaction that came when the teacher flinched back. This man clearly didn't realize that Naruto wasn't an idiot. In fact, he clearly knew very little about him at all. He had a different way of learning, but he was incredibly fast in taking to things once things finally clicked in his brain. He knew exactly how to do his reading assignments. He just mixed his letters up and struggled to understand sentences. He needed extra help to keep up, but when he got that aid, he was fine. Iruka would know that if he'd been doing his job. Instead, Iruka's expression was one of deep contempt. Naruto felt his tears spill over, his gaze never leaving his teacher as he blindly slapped around for his backpack. He found the strap and yanked it up, tumbling out of his seat with his breaths escaping in quick, sharp bursts. His teacher held his assignment so tightly it was crumpling, and Naruto's throat closed up. Was he not allowed to be smart? He had finally done something right, and he was in trouble. They thought he was lying. That was total nonsense. It wasn't fair at all. But then, for Naruto, when was anything? He didn't deserve fair. He never had, why would he ever? He'd been so foolish to think he could do this. Naruto wasn't good at things like this. He probably never would be. He should have just accepted that. You're going to regret this. Pakun's voice came out a gravelly hiss. The pug couldn't wait to tell Minato all about this. Let's go, pup. Don't worry about it. We'll handle this, and your grades are going to be fine. Naruto either didn't hear or didn't believe his comforts. He tugged his bag closer, practically tripping to get away. His vision blurred with salty tears that tore wet tracks down his tan cheeks. Iruka watched him go, his heavy silence somehow more intimidating than his yelling ever could be. Naruto swung his bag onto his back, clutching Pakun close as his breaths continued to stutter haltingly. He rushed out of the room, hyperventilating in his bout of panic. Pakun tried calling his name a few times, squirming in his arms to no avail. His worried voice fell on deaf ears as Naruto hurried to get out of the suffocating school. It felt like the walls were closing in on him. Things had been going so well, and he'd been happy. School hadn't felt as stressful or tense as it did most days he went. He was understanding the work for once, and he had a friend to talk to during their break. He had a dad at home and Kashi and all the other doggies. But things could never quite go his way. He was a demon, a little monster that everyone hated and wanted to disappear. His dad was going to be so mad when he found out. He had done his very best on his work, but he knew anyone who cheated got an automatic 0. A complete fail. He'd be so disappointed. He wasn't going to want an idiot son. The little blonde boy nearly ran right into Kakashi's legs, just barely stopped by the silver-haired man's hands on his shoulders. It was the first time in a while Pakun had seen his boss on time. The relief he felt was monumental. He looked as though he'd just been about to step in to come looking for Naruto, the nearly empty courtyard no doubt having worried him. He seemed startled, gathering Naruto up in his arms as the boy sobbed. Pakun was shifted out of Naruto's tight grasp and into Kakashi's free arm, the blonde boy throwing his arms around the copycat nin and burying his face in his shoulder. Pakun was shaking almost as much as Naruto was, though for an entirely different reason. What happened? Kakashi's voice sounded lax on the surface, but Pakun knew better. He felt his lips peel back, displaying his sharp canines and the frustration he seldom ever let bubble out. Kakashi's expression darkened. He was starting to get it. I wasn't giving him the answers, I was just helping the kid. It's not like the teacher was. Pakun huffed out angrily. He averted his gaze. He accused him of lying. Said I've been feeding him answers all day. Naruto has been working real hard, boss. And he's smart, too. The nerve of that teacher. Pakun's voice rumbled out in a growl. Kakashi had a mask of complete calm, but anyone who knew him well would be able to spot the tension underneath. He looked like he was considering walking into the academy right then and there. Pakan almost wanted him to, and was a little surprised when he turned around instead. Naruto was still heaving sobs into his shoulder, unable to even form words as his panic spilled out in waves. Kakashi couldn't fathom how anyone could do this to a child. Jinchuriki or not, Naruto was just a kid. Kakashi had seen firsthand the discrimination Naruto went through in the classroom. Though it wasn't as blatant or harsh as what happened in the streets, it was still present and all too irritating. Kakashi had never had the chance to do anything about it. Minato Namikaze had been doing everything in his ability to be a father to Naruto, despite having been gone so long. This was one of those issues Kakashi knew his sensei was dying to sink his teeth into. Kakashi was aware Naruto didn't get help in the classroom with his schoolwork. Not like his classmates did. He knew Pakan and trusted the dog with everything in him, and he knew he wasn't the type to simply give answers. He was harsher than that, more willing to challenge. Naruto needed more help than most did, and that was okay, it didn't make him stupid. A lot of kids did. Kushina had, if Kakashi recalled the woman's words correctly. Even in adulthood, she had trouble catching onto things the same as her peers. That didn't mean she wasn't wickedly intelligent. Naruto was the same way. To think he'd get in trouble and accused of cheating just because someone finally showed him a way he understood. Well, Kakashi knew he was going to have words with that teacher. Ma, there's no need to worry about that. School is overrated anyway, Naruto. Kakashi chirped, bouncing the boy slightly. Let's go see your dad. He's been dying to see you all day, you know. You should have seen him when he got back from dropping you off. I thought he was going to turn right back around and come back. Naruto hiccuped slightly, shifting in Kakashi's grasp just enough to tell the copy nin that he'd heard him. Kakashi let out a breath of air, adjusting his grip on him and Pakan as they set out. Naruto didn't peel himself away from the copy nin, body still experiencing tremors as his tears poured out in droves. Kakashi didn't comment on it, hopping off towards where Minato would be anxiously waiting for them. He spoke idly to Naruto as they went, his voice light and the topic straying far from anything school-related. It calmed him only slightly, but that was all right. Kakashi knew this was something Minato-sensei would need to deal with if they wanted Naruto to calm down completely. If anything, the copycat nin just hoped he could be there to see the look on Yumino's face when he got a talking to from the fourth Hokage. Minato was pacing, and then pacing some more. Hiruzen watched with no small amount of amusement as his successor practically wore a hole in the floor. He was like an anxious lion prowling back and forth, his nose scrunched and his brow furrowed. They'd spent the day catching Minato up. He was quick to memorize what needed to be known and asked inquisitive questions that proved to further his knowledge on what he'd missed out on. Hiruzen arranged for an announcement for Minato's reinstatement as Hokage to be made as soon as a few days, eager to get this hat off his head and back onto the blond young man's. Konoha was already abuzz with anticipation, ready to accept their fourth Hokage back with open arms and open hearts. He'd been much missed, and his official return was being much anticipated. The streets were alight with celebration already, colored lanterns lighting up the busier districts every night since the news broke as people gathered and cheered. Hiruzen did momentarily have to wonder if Minato was ready to accept them back. He was not the same man he had been before, changed slightly by this new future. There were grimaces of distaste when certain things were talked about, and questions coded in sharp, tempered steel still hot from the forge. His blue eyes had almost seemed to glow as he leaned forward, head cocked in a manner near eerie. He wanted to know why his son had been treated so horribly in his absence. In his shoes, who wouldn't? He wanted to know if it would have changed had he not appeared when he did. Naruto was the hero of the village. He'd taken on a burden he hadn't wanted, and he'd done so successfully. He was the village's Jinchuriki. If anything, he was an individual to be cherished and praised. A little boy who had more strength than he realized. Truth be told, Hiruzen had drawn a blank when showered in inquiries like these. He felt uneasy under the cold, unfamiliar gaze shot at him. Opening his mouth to spew out excuses felt too much like a misstep. He was teetering on the edge of something. What that was, Hiruzen wouldn't claim to know. It felt dangerous, like Minato had reached the end of his very long patience in the blink of an eye, and was just waiting for someone to make another slip-up. His love for his son was not to be underestimated. Despite having missed out on Naruto's youngest years, that did not mean he cared for his son any less. His adoration for him was still just as strong as it had ever been, possibly even stronger now that he'd gotten a chance to meet and bond with the boy. Back at the matter at hand, Minato could hardly focus on anything. The academy had let out not too long ago, yet the fourth was still restless as ever. The moment the clock hit 3:30, he was nearly about to lose his composure, standing up with newfound abruptness and some odd form of determination. The paperwork they'd been looking over was left abandoned as he walked the length of the room, rubbing at his face every so often as though trying to snap himself out of something and shaking his head. Kushina would surely be laughing if she could see her husband now. Hiruzen wondered if maybe, somewhere she was. A knock at the door drew the third away from more somber thoughts. Minato whirled so fast you'd have thought he used Hiruzen to turn, tearing open the double doors with gusto and a hopeful expression. Kakashi was on the other side just as expected, fist raised to knock. Pakun trotted past Minato's feet with a frustrated expression marring his wrinkled face. Hiruzen could recall the Ninkin being grumpy on the few occasions he'd actually seen him, but right now it looked downright irate. Seeing Naruto's shaking form, he had a sinking feeling there was a good reason as to why. He took a long drag of his pipe as Minato's form tensed. Minato's expression dropped. It delved into something darker as Kakashi stepped in, his lone eye grim and bordering on apologetic. Minato immediately looked like he'd been punched, looking at the small, quivering form in Kakashi's arms with growing panic in his expression. Naruto's body rattled with the force of his distress, hiccups causing him to jolt every so often. Minato reached out weakly, hands hovering and unsure what to do, his eyes turning desperate in a matter of seconds. The whiplash of emotions wasn't unexpected coming from someone like him, but Hiruzen still found himself intrigued by this new side of his successor. Naruto could hardly find it in himself to breathe at this point. He was being silly, he knew. Only babies cried over things like this. Normally, he wouldn't have really batted an eye. Maybe yelled a little and gotten loud, but he'd have taken the failing grade with a roll of his eyes were it any other day. This was different, however. He had expectations he wanted to meet nowadays. Something to put effort in for. He didn't want to let down his dad. If he did, what if he got thrown out? Just as quickly as he'd taken Naruto in, he could surely send him right back out if he chose to do so. Naruto. Minato trailed off. The boy tensed immediately, hands tightening around the fabric of Kakashi's vest. Minato looked at his student, imposing and full of authority. He almost seemed to grow taller, like he hadn't been standing at his full height before. Kakashi shifted his grip on the Jinchuriki. What happened? A bad day at school. Kakashi noted but didn't elaborate. Maybe now wasn't the time. The copycat nin looked down at the 5-year-old clinging to him, tugging him away from his body slightly to try and get a look at his face. We're here, Naruto. And I promise Minato-sensei won't be mad. Just look. He's been waiting for you all this time. Naruto's hand shot up to wipe desperately at his tears, his face red and splotchy. He seemed embarrassed and panicked, and Minato's heart ached. The cage looked stricken as Kakashi gave his son a closed-eye smile. Naruto sniffled, glancing almost shyly at Minato. Seeing his distress sparked an undeniable frustration in him. Who had done this to him? Who had upset him this bad? It hurt. This was his little boy, and someone had upset him to the point of him breaking down into tears. Naruto was everything, the sun, the moon, and the stars all in one. He was so cheerful and bright. Optimistic despite all he'd been through, and undeniably clever. To think someone had gone out of their way to break him like this, Well, Minato had never claimed to be all that forgiving. He's right, Naruto. I've been practically dying to see you. Minato stepped a little closer, arms open and eyes hopeful. Naruto peered at him a little more openly. There was a visceral fear in his eyes that made Minato sick. What was he afraid of? Surely not Minato, right? If he was, how did he fix that? I don't know what happened, but I'm sure it wasn't your fault. We'll get it resolved together, okay? I promise. Naruto's expression crumbled like a sandcastle hit by a tidal wave. It dropped into something so vulnerable that it made Minato realize just how guarded his son had been before. The yellow flash swept his son away from Kakashi, cradling him and shushing him softly. Naruto tensed just briefly before allowing himself to melt, unable to find the will to doubt right now. His dad didn't seem mad. Would he be mad if he knew? He'd said they'd resolve it together. It was a nice sentiment, but what if he didn't stick to his word when he found out what had gone down? Iruka-sensei was a real-life ninja and a teacher to boot. What adult wouldn't believe him? All he had to back him up was Pakun, but that was their word against the words of everyone, really. It wasn't like anyone else would stand up for him. He was 6 years old and a monster. Anyone who could give testament to his character wouldn't have anything good to say. Still, Naruto couldn't help but indulge in this. Couldn't help but wrap his arms around his father and lean into him, hoping beyond belief that it would all work out. His dad comforted him, rubbing soothing circles along his back and promising him that it was going to be okay. That he could never be mad at Naruto, and that he would believe him no matter what. These small reassurances built up, soothing Naruto far more than Kakashi's words were able to. He soaked it all up like a sponge, trying to tell himself he did deserve this, even if he was a monster. He did deserve this, right? He was allowed to have this, wasn't he? I promise I tried really hard. He sputtered out through his tears, face pressed into his dad's shoulder. I didn't cheat. I promise. I know, Naruto, I know. You would never do that. Minato soothed with conviction, tone soft and coated in comfort. The expression on his face told a whole other story. Kakashi wasn't sure he'd ever seen a man look so grim. Hiruzen swallowed heavily, hands clenched atop his desk as he watched the scene unfold. Minato wasn't going to let the injustice Naruto had faced all his life so far go unchecked. And hearing Naruto's cracking voice and broken pleas, maybe that was a good thing. They calmed him down and let Pakun do most of the talking. The pug didn't cut any corners, voice unforgiving and eyes set in stone. Naruto flushed hot with embarrassment. He couldn't believe he'd cried like that. Looking at his dad now, who nodded in understanding and scoffed on his behalf, it was obvious he had overreacted. The little boy had fully expected some sort of rejection or disappointment. Some anger from his dad, perhaps. Not this unyielding belief in him. He heard him and Pakun out, and immediately trusted everything they'd said without a shred of doubt. It was pretty amazing if you asked him. No one had ever done that for him before. Naruto had to once again question whether or not he'd finally lost it. Perhaps this was a dream. A hallucination. Again, he could have hit his head on something and was in a coma. That was his running theory for now, believe it. Minato had taken him home, gotten him ice cream on the way, and reassured him once again that everything was fine. He told Hiruzen to jumpstart the announcement of his reinstatement ceremony. Instead of releasing the notice a few days later, it was to go out today. Whether the third liked it or not. This would result in the academy closing down for the remainder of the week, allowing Naruto the break he needed after such a traumatic event, as Minato had dubbed it. Naruto had given him a weird look. This wasn't nearly the worst thing that had ever happened to him, but it had upset him more than most things would. He was grateful all the same. I see. Minato's smile was tight as the explanation fully finished. Naruto was propped up on his hip, and Kakashi could almost see an apron on the man in his mind's eye. He looked painfully domestic, even with his frustration. Naruto didn't seem to notice, licking the melted ice cream that threatened to dribble down the cone and onto his hand. It seems Naruto's sensei, and I will be having some words. Murder isn't legal, Kakashi reminded smoothly. He eyed his sensei. Next time you see him, you'll be the fourth Hokage again. Oh, I know. Minato hummed, sounding content with himself. Kakashi shrugged vaguely. That was fair enough. He couldn't say he hadn't thought of flying through the window of Uruka's classroom and teaching him a lesson of his own. Kakashi sort of wished he could be there to witness when Minato finally did let loose. The man wanted to make an impact when he did it, Kakashi could tell. Where Kushina was brash and rushed into things, Minato had always proven to stay level-headed and clever. If he wanted things to hurt, then by God they were going to hurt. Kakashi might have felt pity for Yumino were he not so riled up himself. He simply hid it better than most. He'd always been good at hiding how he really felt, shoving his emotions below a cool facade. The more he looked at Minato-sensei's quiet and subtle frustration, the more he realized he'd probably gotten it from him. Naruto bounced back just as he did from most things, recovering when Kakashi's other ninkins surrounded him with happy yips and wagging tails. They licked his hands free of the stickiness the melted ice cream had created. Minato seemed to sink into his son's giggles, terse expression melding into something warmer and more serene. Kakashi couldn't help but let out a breath of relief as well. He was worried his sensei was rushing a bit too fast back into this Hokage thing. After only a day of revision, was he truly ready to take the mantle back up? Kakashi had never been one to doubt Minato Namikaze, of course, but this was a whole other game they were playing here. He'd been gone 6 years and was a father all of a sudden. To a living, breathing child who could already walk, talk, and voice his opinions. His wife was gone, and the village was in a mild state of disarray. It was a lot to take in, and even more to fix. The academy did in fact close, and the village was indeed sent into the very frenzy they'd all suspected. Decorations were mounted, and businesses boomed. Everyone was excited to see their beloved Yondaime return. The festival was thrown together with careful haste that had the entire village eager to do their part, wanting to show their best to the fourth. It seemed there was no one unhappy with the news, all of them scrambling to create something beyond satisfactory for their returned hero. Wistful tales of his fight against the fox and his return from death spread amongst the people, sure to be told for generations to come. Kakashi found himself quite amused by it all. Minato didn't seem to share the sentiment. Though grateful, it was clear he wanted this to be over with. Kakashi suspected this had something to do with Minato's simmering frustration towards Uruka Yumino, but he wouldn't comment. Naruto was the proudest of all. Nothing could rival his grin and his awe towards his father. The morning of the dubbed crowning came down upon them quickly. Minato had been scrambling to catch up on things, leaving Naruto with Kakashi during the day to go up to the Hokage's office, and relishing in the lunches his son came up to spend with him. It was time he wouldn't trade for the world. It felt like Naruto and Kakashi were all he had, even if he knew that wasn't true. Things were different now. His past friends had aged, experienced, and seen 6 years more than he had. It placed a gap between them that didn't seem there with Naruto or Kakashi, even if Minato wished desperately he could have been there for his son. Naruto sat on his dad's bed, hair in a bedraggled disarray from his sleep. He watched in muted wonderment as his dad tugged on his signature coat, the white fabric billowing slightly. Red flames marked the bottom edges of the jacket. He had seen it in history books a few times, sketched out in a way that didn't do the real sight justice. Naruto was struck with disbelief, the realization that this was his father settling into him. He tried not to let his astonishment show too much. He was getting better at not expecting the worst from his father, but it was hard not to think he'd eventually find him annoying or foolish. He was Naruto Uzumaki, after all. The village's demon child, a nuisance at best and a demon at worst. He still couldn't believe how much his dad seemed to love him, He did love him, right? It felt nice to be loved, if this was what love was. Kashi loved him too, he thought, and so did the Ninkin. It was a realization that never failed to leave him breathless, even if he still felt uncertain and confused by it at times. He could hardly believe it. If he did try to tell anyone, he wouldn't quite blame them for saying he was lying. He couldn't even be mad at Uruka-sensei for not thinking he had a dad. Even Naruto still wasn't sure about this whole parent thing. He was ever the skeptic, waiting for a switch to flip or for something to go wrong. I hope you're almost ready. You've got places to be. Kakashi drawled, appearing in the doorframe. He wasn't one to talk. Like Naruto, he wasn't dressed either. Shikaku-sama is here, huh? That old guy with the scar. Shikamaru's dad. Naruto blurted out. Minato swallowed a laugh at his son's perplexed expression. The very same. Though I'd forgotten he had a son. Minato admitted, adjusting his cuffs. I'll come find you after the ceremony, all right. We can all go get ramen. Naruto didn't need any more convincing. He dove off the bed in a flying leap, dashing off to his room. The faster he got dressed, the faster everyone could get going, and thus the faster he could get his ramen. That was something he could get behind, believe it. The sound of thundering paws coming down the hall had Kakashi shaking his head and letting out a breath. The Ninkin all zoomed past, chasing Naruto's small footsteps all the way to his bedroom, where he was surely rifling through his dresser with reckless abandon. Minato's smile was so wide it looked like his cheeks hurt. Shikaku's head popped through the door. I was wondering where they were all going. He admitted, his lazy drawl the same as it had always been. How's Naruto settling in? Seems like Kakashi's Ninkin have taken to him quite well. That would be an understatement. Kakashi sighed, deflating. They were hardly his Ninkin anymore. How had Naruto won them over so quickly? He'd seen the boy slip them food, sure, but they'd been enamored with him long before that. Was it because he was small and cute? Kakashi had been tiny and undeniably adorable once too, and even then they'd still treated him the same. Not that he'd had all of them back then, but the point still stood. Naruto had them wrapped around his finger, and the blonde didn't even realize it. He was just happy to have the friends, he claimed. If only he knew how willing they'd be to help him. They may as well be his at this point. Minato agreed with no small amount of amusement. He grinned cheekily. He's settling in great. A few ups and downs, but we're getting somewhere. And after today, Naruto is never going to have to worry about the village bothering him again. Minato rubbed his hands together like he was scheming. Shikaku and Kakashi shared a look and unanimously decided that they probably didn't want to know. Uruka can't stop shaking, his face drained of all the color it previously held, and his heart beating so fast he can hardly hear it anymore. It was the first day back to the academy since the Hawkage's reinstatement ceremony. The festivities had stretched on for days on end, their charismatic fourth Hawkage coming down to join them for the celebration. He walked around and interacted, actually taking the time to talk to the civilians under him and hear their concerns. People showered him in absolute praise. Uruka had been one of those people, though it was from afar. The fourth Hawkage was a living legend. A powerful man who'd faced down the terrifying nine-tailed fox and beat it. To find out he was still alive had been astonishing. To see him return to power had provided elation. And now, to watch him sweep his way into Uruka's quaint little classroom, well, he's scared stiff. He is everything Uruka imagined and more. All power and intimidation, with strong blue eyes and a shock of blonde hair that gave him his moniker to begin with. The yellow flash stands tall, towering over him with his long coat sweeping behind him. The one Uruka had revered as a child. The smile he wears is unsettling, and Uruka had only faintly been able to register the boy in his arms before a wave of killing intent, heavy enough to level, a building bears down on him. It's like all the air has been sucked out of the room. He just barely manages to comprehend that the fourth has one of his students. Naruto Uzumaki stares at him with unrestrained apprehension. That dog from before is in his arms again, looking at him with a grumpy and judgmental gaze that makes his legs threaten to fold underneath him. At first he's astonished. Why in the world would the fourth Hokage be carrying around the village Jinchuriki? He can't fathom it. It doesn't seem hostile. He cradles Naruto carefully, like he's something to be cherished. There are a few dots Iruka feels he should be connecting as he looks between the pair. Something obvious is flying over his head, and he is terrified. I heard you had some complications with my son last he was in class. Minato cocked his head coyly, and well, yeah, that makes a little too much sense. That doesn't mean it quite processes in his mind. There's too much to wrap his head around. One thing he knows for sure is that he's made a very, very grave mistake. Son. Iruka sputtered out. He almost denies it, but then those finicky little dots finally find themselves, and he realizes just how similar they look. Two shocks of yellow and two pairs of ocean blues, both staring at him with very different intents. Naruto just looks scared and uncertain, whilst Minato Namikaze's gaze feels so sharp it could physically cut him. The pieces fall into place, and Iruka distantly wonders how no one else has figured it out. The baby Lord Fourth was forced to use was not chosen from a group. He used the only child available in order to save the village. In the end, it's quite obvious he had to seal the 9 tails in his own son. And if that isn't tragic, well, Iruka's predicament certainly will be. Minato is all cold, pleasant tension, and sharp smiles that bury themselves in Iruka like claws. His breath stutters in his chest, every unkind thing he's ever said or done to Naruto crashing back into him in his state of shock. He looks at his student, wondering how much of it he's told his father. He can't find it in himself to be upset at the boy, every ounce of reasoning draining out of him as the story comes full circle in his mind. The realization that this life is the last thing their fourth Hokage wanted for his son, and that Naruto in fact isn't the 9-tailed fox. He's just a boy. Because the Yondaime would not be holding him so carefully were he a monster, and Iruka is sure of this. When he came home crying, I was quite worried. Minato leaned forward, casting a shadow over him that makes him wilt. Naruto doesn't seem to notice his father's absolute frustration, hugging Pakun as his teacher shrinks further and further back. I sent my students Ninkin with him to school to help him out. You know how he has trouble learning traditionally, don't you? So imagine my surprise when he comes home, begging me to believe he didn't cheat. I'm sorry. It comes out a squeak. I shouldn't have. He doesn't receive the extra help he needs. It's such a shame. Minato continues, ignoring him entirely. His eyes seem to glow eerily, the rising sun casting ominously across his face. Iruka's heart is racing, and he can still hardly believe it. Son. Son. Iruka knows his mistreatment of Naruto was wrong. But everyone did it. It was second nature to see Naruto that way, as an extension of the fox inside him. He'd never thought for a second someone would step up for the boy. Especially not the fourth Hokage who is, apparently, evidently his father. Iruka can't come up with a single thing to say. The fourth Hokage, his hero, is furious with him. And he's not even sure he can be upset about that. Then again, he can't feel much other than absolute, utter shock. He's never felt fear like this before. He blinks rapidly to try and keep his tears from following, eyes darting between Minato's smiling face and Naruto's slightly perplexed one. I apologize, Minato's smile drops. Iruka feels he's made a grave misstep. A hand lashes out, grasping his collar and tugging him up. He chokes slightly, pupils shrinking as his fear kicks into maximum overdrive. He thinks he hears Naruto suck in a sharp breath of air, but he can't be sure. His eyes are stuck connected to Minato Namikaze's cold, blue gaze. There's a dangerous magnetism that keeps him from looking away. He doesn't want to think about what could happen if he dared to dart his eyes away. Yumino, The way the yondaime says his name makes him feel like he's less than nothing. He makes a strangled noise as Minato's face leans closer, so tense that Uruka isn't surprised the man managed to beat the nine-tailed fox. Minato's voice is low and sends 1,000 alarm bells shrieking through Uruka's head. I want you to know that my son is the most important thing to me. Above any and all else, he is my first priority. The only reason I left him in the first place was because he would have died if I hadn't. My death was not just for the village. Do you understand? Uruka manages a pitiful nod. It's hard to breathe. The air is too stifling. Any insult to him is an insult to me. I want you to throw any preconceived notions you have about him away right now. You're starting over. It wasn't a request. Naruto is smart. He learns faster than any child I've ever met. Just because his process isn't the same does not mean he is less. His circumstance, the grip tightens. Uruka's heart sputters pathetically. Uruka is honestly surprised it hasn't stopped yet, means nothing in relation to his character. His sacrifices go far beyond anything you will ever do. If he comes home with even an inkling of a complaint about you or your teaching abilities, I want you to know that I will hold you accountable. This is my child. You take care of him or you'll answer to me. He punctuates his calm, cold words by releasing him with a thrust. Uruka stumbles, barely managing to catch himself against the blackboard as his legs give out. He blinks a few times, his entire body trembling so hard he can practically feel his brain rattling around in his skull. He wonders how many years were just shaved off his lifespan. Far too many, he's sure. The Hawkage's cold expression is gone, his false pleasantness back and much preferred when put up next to whatever that confrontation before was. Uruka gulps down a few deep breaths, looking to Naruto. The boy looks more lost than anything else, blinking down at his teacher with evident concern etched into the lines of his young face. The dog in his arms looks impossibly smug, lips curling. Uruka can't do much else other than take deep breaths, resisting the urge to clutch the fabric resting over his wildly racing heart. He wonders why he's not in more trouble. He almost wishes the ground would swallow him. I'm very sorry. The brunette somehow manages to choke out. He can hear some of his other students chattering in the hallway, no doubt forming a line waiting for him to tell them to come in like he does every morning. Minato adjusts his grip on his son, looking downright polite as Uruka struggles to right himself. I'm sorry. Prove it. Minato chirps in contrast to his previous intensity. And just like that, he's planting a happy kiss in his son's sunny hair and setting the boy on the ground. Naruto lets it happen, still looking beyond confused as his father gives him a hug and dotingly straightens his backpack straps. Uruka could gawk at the whiplash. The sudden mood change makes him wonder if he just imagined the entire encounter. His heart about to give out tells him he hadn't pretty clearly. That doesn't make him feel any less astonished. The Hawkage tells Naruto he's going to have an amazing day. He's the picture-perfect image of a loving father. He beams at his son, and Uruka can't help but think of a planet circling a star. That's what Minato is. Earth orbiting around the sun, all encapsulated and reliant on its light. He wonders what the man would have been like if his son hadn't been here when he got back. What sort of grief he'd go through, what kind of character he'd display. Uruka's throat bobs as Naruto grins back, still shooting concerned and bewildered looks at his sensei. Uruka can't even force a smile, too shaken to bother trying. Kakashi will pick you up. You can tell him all about your day. A sharp glance reminds Uruka of his place, as though he could ever forget. Don't worry. The paperwork for Pac unprocessed, so you're completely free to have him here to help you. Really? Naruto looks excited by the mere notion. Uruka's heart would break were it, again, not about to give out entirely. He still can't breathe. Minato's presence is still large, and still fills the room with attention so thick he can almost see it. Naruto shoots him a small glance, seeming hesitant to say anything in front of him. His voice lowers just a little, his frame shrinking just slightly. It's really okay. Minato's happy smile strains for a moment. Uruka wonders if Naruto Uzumaki will accidentally get him in serious trouble. Wouldn't be much of a surprise at this point. He wouldn't blame the kid. Not his fault he has a legend as a dad who apparently would go to great lengths for him. Uruka is going to have nightmares for the rest of his life. He wonders if he'll be able to look his student in the eyes without shivering. They're the same shade of blue, after all. Perfectly fine, kid. Pakken reassured, patting Naruto's arm with his paw. Minato nods in an over-exaggerated way. Now why don't we go sit down? Bell's about to ring. Minato is in a good mood when he meets with Fugaku Uchiha, humming a jovial tune to himself as the man enters. The blonde waves the bow off happily. It's a nice change that makes Fugaku straighten a little with hopefulness. It's the first time in years he's felt that his concerns about the clan might be heard. They'd begun to consider taking matters into their own hands as the tension between the Uchiha clan and the rest of Konoha grew. The talk of it was mild, mere whispers if that, but Fugaku knew it would grow to be an issue. An issue he feared he wouldn't totally be against if this continued any longer. There was too much distrust and animosity between his clan and the village. Maybe the fourth Hokage could help resolve that. He hoped for all their sakes that he would. He'd been good to them when he was in power. The third Hokage had been okay to them too. Even so, Tobirama Senju had still been Sarutobai's sensei, and those ideals that the Uchiha were not to be trusted had bled into his beliefs a little too much for their liking. Minato Namikaze was a refreshing change compared to that. Open-minded and kind-hearted. One of his students had been an Uchiha, and his wife had been best friends with Fugaku's own partner. He'd done good by them. Things had felt like they were finally starting to heal when his death struck. Lord Hokage. Fugaku gave a stiff greeting. Minato laughed, airy and light just like Fugaku had always known him to be. The dark-haired man can't help but relax slightly at the sound of it. If Minato is anything like he remembered, he knows the Anbu that are normally stationed here have already been requested to leave. He checks nonetheless, his chakra half-heartedly reaching out and finding nothing there. The privacy seals hidden in the walls and floor are active, giving a small hum that promises security. Enough with the formalities, Fugaku-san. You know just Minato is fine. We've known each other for ages. Minato waved him off for a moment before an odd expression flitted across his face. Fugaku watched the smile turn sheepish. Though I do suppose it's been a while. It's still odd to think about. Sorry about that. It's no matter. I imagine you've been going through quite a bit in trying to adjust. A lot has changed. Fugaku felt relieved already. Minato really hadn't seemed to have changed, even being gone for 6 years. He can only hope his blatant distaste for Danzo Shimura has fully stuck around. I thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Minato gives him an odd look, and Fugaku realizes that, oh, it didn't used to be hard for the Uchiha clan heads to request an audience with a village leader. Now it's a struggle to get any of the council members to look their way. Trying to get them to listen is nearly impossible. Excuses are made, pushing aside all the mistreatment and downplaying the loss of trust. Blame is tossed out shamelessly. The gaslighting anytime it comes up is so obvious that Fugaku can't help but sigh every time it happens. He once again feels eager to talk to Minato. The rest of his clan has been excited too, the elders abuzz with hope that the Yondaime will do them justice once more. Anytime, Fugaku-san. You know it's no trouble. Minato's expression turned a little more serious. He scooted a bit closer to his desk, leaning forward in an intent way that makes Fugaku feel a little more heard. He tries to resist the urge to lean forward as well. I've heard a few things about your clan. I haven't seen hardly any of them around the village. What happened after I died? Things feel unbalanced. They are. Fugaku lets out a breath of air. Minato Namikaze cares, is concerned. It's a weight off his shoulders. After the Kyubai's attack on the village, it was insisted that we move after the damage done to the village and our compound, as well as the police station's headquarters. They claimed it was necessary for reconstruction purposes. It caused a lot of tension, though that's only the tip of the iceberg. Move. Minato blinked, brows furrowing like he didn't understand. Move where? You're literally the police force. The best place for you is in the center of the village. No one will outright say it, but the blame for the Kyuubi attack is being placed on our clan. Fugaku admitted. He leaned forward, earnest and begging to be heard. I want you to know this isn't true. We never would have thought, you know how much Kushina-san meant to Makoto. But with the reports of the fox having Sharingan eyes, nobody would listen to our protests or bother to look into their credibility. We were moved to the outskirts of the village, the very far south. Fugaku held his breath, watching with a morbid sense of awe as several different emotions flitted across Minato's face. His expression shifted so openly, showing his absolute astonishment. Fugaku feels his worry melt away. The stress lining his shoulders lessened significantly. He could almost bring himself to laugh as Minato stared at him like what he'd said was absolutely insane. Like he's waiting for a punchline or for it to be a joke. Fugaku wishes it was. The fact that Minato does too is a sure and positive sign that makes Fugaku look forward to tomorrow for the first time in a long time. Finally, the cage seems to snap out of it. He leans forward even more, almost rising from his seat. He looks a mixture of frustrated and confused. Maybe even hurt. What happened to the land your clan used to occupy? He checks. Fugaku blew out a breath of air. It remains. It has yet to be repaired, despite its location. The clan head admits bitterly. Their clan had inhabited the center of the village since its founding. It had been the epicenter of it when it had been built. The very core of Konoha once upon a time, so proud and strong. The beating heart of the village. Fugaku can still remember those days, so golden and full of trust. He misses them. He wishes his kids had gotten a chance, a real chance to see. Oh, so it's empty. Minato quirked a brow, collapsing back into his seat. Fugaku blinked at him as the man shrugged. So we'll just move you back. Fugaku stares for a moment. Minato stares back, completely serious. The casualness of it all nearly makes the Uchiha clan head choke. The idea of home burns its way to the forefront of his mind. It's like a piece of meat being held up in front of a starving dog. He almost thinks Minato is going to yank it away. That he's taunting him. He knows the Yondaime isn't like that. He knows this, but he can't help but think it. The idea of his clan returning and retaking their duties protecting the village, it's almost unimaginable. He can practically see the joy on his clanmates' faces, can see the crime rates fall, their relationship with the civilian population restored. The offer sounds impossible. Even he hadn't thought to consider it. You'll just what? He checks. Minato blinked at him. Move you back. He offered, shrugging as though it weren't a big deal. His brows furrowed, and Fugaku swallowed thickly at the influx of emotions that flooded through his very core. Well, the few contractors I knew are probably not as reliable anymore, I guess. Do you know anyone good at building restoration? If it was damaged and hasn't been fixed, we'll have work to do. Your clan has been inhabiting that land for over a century. It wasn't right for them to, hey, are you crying? Fugaku is, but the privacy seals won't tell if Minato won't. Jiraiya can't stop sweating, his dark eyes scanning the letter he'd just received for what seemed like the millionth time. The falcon that had brought it here sat perched at the windowsill, preening its feathers without a care in the world. The creature is unaware of the bomb it just dropped. It doesn't seem to mind waiting for Jiraiya to come up with a reply, ever patient and dutiful. The white-haired Sannin isn't sure he can muster up the strength to write, let alone the thought. The news is it's impossible. He wants to say it's a sick prank, even though his gut tells him it isn't. The Hawkage's official stamp, laced with Hiruzen's chakra, is a stark piece of evidence alluding to this letter's authenticity. It's such a stuttering realization that he can't stop his hands from curling into fists. The fine parchment crumples under tense fingers, but Jiraiya doesn't care. He can hardly breathe, air stolen from his lungs. The man closes his eyes and gathers himself through his grief. Minato had been like a son to him. They'd been so close, Jiraiya bestowing every ounce of wisdom he could find on the blonde boy, doing his best to feed his students' incessant need for knowledge. He watched the orphan grow into something strong and steady, ever the genius and all too willing to serve. Minato'd lost his life to the village, putting everyone else first just as he always had. It was noble and Jiraiya was proud, but that didn't take the pain of the loss away. Jiraiya hadn't been there when it happened. He hadn't been there after, either. He's a coward and he knows it. There is a new cage. A reinstated one, Hiruzen's soft brushstrokes claim. Minato Namikaze appeared in the village completely unscathed and unaged, just as he'd been before the Kyubai's devastating attack. No one is sure how it happened, some sort of seal, perhaps. They don't know, and Jiraiya can't even begin to fathom. All they know for sure is that it's him and he's returned. They confirmed it thoroughly. Inouchi's document tacked to the notice with an in-depth report of Minato's initial interview when they first brought him in. Jiraiya's breath is stolen. He can hardly wrap his head around the idea of Minato being back with how hard his death hit. Jiraiya had been too much of a coward to go back to the village after his death. Excuses flooded through, weeks turned into months, and soon it was just too easy to bounce from place to place. He sent intel here and there, but returning had always felt out of the question. There was too much to face, grief, a world without his student, Kushina Naruto. God, Naruto. Jiraiya can't imagine Minato is very happy about that, but Hiruzen had sent him sketches of the boy and sparse reports about how he was doing, none of them sounding all that great if he's being honest. They were few and far between, and it's been at least 2 years since he got one, but he's seen and read enough to know the boy is a spitting image of his father. Sunshine blonde hair depicted in scratchy sketches and pools of unmistakable blue. Just looking at him would be painful, even if the letters riddled Jiraiya with guilt for not being there. Talking to Naruto and knowing how he's failed him, as a godfather, someone who was supposed to be there for him, would be too much. It's pathetic and he hates himself for it, but it's true. If this is real, Minato isn't going to be anything but upset. But now, if Minato is back, he has to know. He has to go see for himself, no matter his apprehension. He blinks back his tears and tries not to hope. A part of him almost prefers this turn out to be a trap. That in and of itself seems easier to deal with in comparison to this. He takes a deep breath, shaking his head and shoving the letter into his pocket harshly. Jiraiya steadies himself and tries to convince himself he's more okay than he actually is. The falcon trills in question. Jiraiya's heart sets in steel. It's time to go home. Kakashi feels quite contented when Naruto bounces from the academy doors with all the other kids pouring out around him, face bright and Pakun still cradled in his arms. It's a bold contrast to the sobbing last time he exited the building, and the copycat Nin is all too happy to observe the change. He shows Naruto as such, beaming with his usual closed-eye smile and receiving the boisterous blonde with open arms. He wonders vaguely, as he swings Naruto up onto his hip, what Obaido and Rin would think if they could see him now. Good with kids. It's pretty unbelievable when you consider what he was like before. I didn't get in trouble at all, Naruto exclaimed in a rush, grinning so wide it looks like it hurts. Kakashi shifts his grip on the kid, spinning on his heel so he can march Naruto off to see his anxious father, who's been worrying the day away despite how busy he's been. Kakashi glances down at the pug Naruto's holding, feeling quite satisfied when the creature nods back to him in confirmation. Good news all around. I'm glad to hear it, Naruto. Did you learn anything new today? Kakashi asked in a chirpy tone, feeling light and happy. He knows he should probably be mildly offended on some level. He's basically a glorified babysitter now, but he can't say he'd have it any other way when he really puts thought into it. He's more deeply satisfied with his life than he has been in a long time now, all too willing to protect and be with Naruto as much as humanly possible to make up for lost time. He's not sure he'll ever forgive the council, Hiruzen, for keeping Naruto from him so strongly. He's not sure Minato will either. Kakashi regrets not defying orders more and doing it anyway. The meager gifts he left the blonde weren't enough. It means little to say he'd do things differently if he could go back in time, but it's true. He would. Believe it. We learned a ton about photosynthesis. Naruto was practically vibrating in his excitement, blue eyes wide and shining with every ounce of joy a child his age deserves to have. Kakashi huffed a little, smile widening under his mask. He ignores the glances they get as he starts down the street. And I got a good grade on my test. Pakun didn't help me. He just read the questions to me so I didn't get the numbers mixed up. It helps when he says it out loud. His statement is a little contradicting when he puts it like that, but Kakashi gets it. Naruto beams sunnily. How can Kakashi not rain praises down on him? It would be considered a crime not to at this point. Minato isn't in his office today. On the contrary, he seems to have jump-started some sort of project in the center of the village. He'd summarized it as revitalizing the area, but Kakashi knew better than that. He was getting it fixed up to move the Uchiha back to their home base. It was a good idea, but it was going to take some minor manipulation when it came to the elders. Kakashi was sure most of the clan heads would side with their blonde Kage, but the rest of the council could be relatively difficult. That was putting it nicely, too. It's a funny trick. Minato had phrased it very cleverly, claiming that the land technically fell under his jurisdiction since he was Hawkage. He didn't really mention the Uchiha when he told Kakashi about it, instead claiming he wanted to return the village to how it used to be before, to restore faith and mend bonds. Not a lie, he quite literally wanted to make this part of the village how it was prior to the tragedy. Emphasis on literally. That meant moving the Uchiha back. Not that the elders needed to know that yet. Minato probably didn't want them to have time to sabotage. He'd reveal it last second, just like he used to. Dad. Naruto shrilled happily, wiggling out of Kakashi's arms when he spotted the man a ways away, his Hawkage coat and bright hair serving as a beacon. Kakashi let him go, watching as the man cheerfully turned away from Fugaku. The pleasant surprise in his eyes made Kakashi feel warm. Pakun shifted, giving a small snort of his own, seeming deeply satisfied by the scene playing out before him. Heartwarming moments like these made Kakashi realize just what he could have missed if his sensei hadn't come back. Naruto. Minato laughed, hugging his son tight. Fugaku gave a small smile, eyes shifting back towards the remnants of the old Uchiha compound. Him being here was a bit of a risk, but Minato had assured him he'd simply claim Fugaku was here as consultation as someone who was familiar with the land. He was great at half-truths like that. Minato planted a kiss on his son's cheek. Good day at school, you. Naruto shrieked, wiping at the spot with a grin that betrayed his joy. He wiggled a little, too excited to keep still. Believe it. Iruka-sensei was super nice today. Minato nodded happily, a warm aura surrounding him. Fugaku eyed him suspiciously before deciding he really didn't want to know. Minato seemed scarier than he recalled, but the stress over the years had been rather intense, so what did he know? His memory could be off for all he knew. He was just relieved. He'd called the Uchiha elders to a meeting this evening, feeling secure enough to share the news after today. Minato had jumped so quickly into action, too readily for him to possibly be lying. He kept Fugaku feeling informed and heard. It meant so much more than Fugaku could ever convey, and he wondered briefly how he could ever hope to repay such kindness. It's nostalgic and sad to see this land again, but he feels emboldened knowing he's going to be moving back in with his clan. This was the compound Sasuke was born in, that Itachi spent his youngest years in, that Fugaku and Mikoto grew up in. It means a great deal, holding more history than most could even begin to imagine. The chance to return is something Fugaku is grasping onto like a lifeline. A solution to so many of their problems. An olive branch extended, the chance to re-establish mutual trust. Fugaku can almost see it now. Thinking too hard about it makes him misty-eyed, which is a true testament to how big a deal this is considering how often he cries. Which is never. I'm glad to hear it. Minato chirped. They are revitalizing the area. It was destroyed after the Nine Tails attack, but I've decided it's about time to fix it up. What do you think? Naruto's gaze drifted towards the construction going on, curiosity sparking when he spotted rotted furniture and wood being removed, roofs being worked on, and overgrown brush being fought back with clippers and broad blades. Minato hiked Naruto further up onto his hip, gazing out at the work being swiftly done. Their progress has been great so far. Fugaku eyed them a bit warily. He'd never really had anything against Naruto, and he certainly doesn't now. He hadn't interacted with the child at all in the past. Sasuke mentioned him on rare occasions, briefly noting how loud and annoying he was. The clan head felt a bit apprehensive to listen to such claims. It was a bit uncomfortable to have his opinion switch just due to the return of Naruto's father, but he couldn't deny that was the case. He was only glad the Uchiha clan had never gone out of their way to harm the boy. Otherwise, Minato-san might not be so forgiving. He shivered at the thought of being on his bad side, silently vowing to bring up the matter of Naruto during the meeting as well. Naruto's little mind whirred, his eyes bouncing from the crest on the elder Uchiha's chest to the fading one on one of the outer walls of the rotting homes within the middle district. He recognized the man as his classmate's dad, Fu something. He didn't know, had never really cared. He was the head of the Uchiha clan, which had used to live here before the village got wrecked by the demon fox that had sorta killed his dad and had definitely killed his mom. But sorta not his dad since he came back. Still sucked either way, but Naruto was glad he was back. Not the point right now. The Uchiha were the police. He knew this based on how many times they'd caught him for vandalism and petty theft, as well as some accounts of trespassing that he really shouldn't have been blamed for. They were pretty chill overall, not any meaner than anyone else was to him. He appreciated the sentiment, but he had always wondered a little why they'd been moved so far away. If they were the police, weren't they supposed to be able to get to everyone really, really fast? Naruto had noticed how long it took for them to show up when he got into trouble. He'd had ample time to get away more than once. Now that they lived way over to the left, it took them a lot longer to get to the right side where Naruto had lived previously. The area was pretty bad as a result. Naruto had definitely witnessed his fair share of muggings and other crimes. He wondered if this place was fixed, would the Uchiha be able to come back? Was he allowed to ask? Things would just be so balanced out. The police taking a long time to arrive had been great for him back when he lived there. But now that he's out of it, he's taken the time to think and really recall some of the awful stuff he saw. It doesn't seem good that people are getting hurt. Not if it's preventable. The boy's eyes shifted to Fugaku, eyeing him up and down speculatively. Minato watched his son with a patient smile, cocking his head when those blue eyes so much like his own turned to him. Minato glanced off to the side as Kakashi came up next to him, Pakan in tow. Naruto gnawed at the inside of his cheek. He was painfully hesitant, but Minato was painfully patient, so it worked. I think it's a good idea. Naruto nodded cautiously in response to the question, caution present clear as day in his expression. Do you have plans for the houses? I think your dad had some ideas, but he's definitely open to suggestions. Kakashi drawled. Naruto's eyes darted to Fugaku, who was giving him a critical look. Minato beamed at the clan head pointedly when he spotted the expression. Fugaku couldn't deny the shiver that shot down his spine. He looked away, clearing his throat a bit. Really? Naruto checked. Really? I'd love to hear what you think. Minato encouraged dotingly. Kakashi rolled his eyes a little, sharing a look with Pakun. The pug didn't seem to see anything wrong with the fourth's affection. They were all too far gone. Kakashi was too, don't get him wrong. He was just self-aware was all. Well, I think, the Uchiha are the police, right? His cheeks flushed. Fugaku's head snapped back in their direction out of surprise alone, and Minato nodded, grin widening. He shifted giddily from foot to foot, trying to keep calm. His son was so smart. Wouldn't it be better for them to come back to the middle? So they can get to everyone. Because it takes them a really long time to get places sometimes, believe it. So there's some people who need help really fast, but they can't get it. And the bad guys know it takes them a long time to get there, or they're too far to notice, so they do more bad things because they know they can get away with it. But it wouldn't be like that if they were in the middle, believe it. Naruto tried to finish off his statement with some amount of confidence. He trusted his dad, but he still couldn't deny he was a little nervous about messing up and disappointing him. So far his dad had showed unwavering support no matter what, praising him for all the things nobody ever noticed before. Naruto apparently had a lot more positive qualities than he even realized. There was still a present fear that the demon thing would turn up, that his dad would hear someone call him a monster and learn the truth, but it wasn't nearly as oppressive as it had been before. His dad isn't that type of guy, right? He'd talked to Uruka-sensei for him and had believed him about his schoolwork. Huh. Pakun piped up after a moment. Kid's a genius. Minato let out a delighted sound and squeezed his son with giddiness. Fugaku had a fairly surprised look on his face, but not a displeased one. It was quite the opposite, actually. He wondered if he could convince Sasuke to change his views, since he quite clearly wasn't as on the nose about the boy's intelligence as he thought. Kakashi chuckled a little. Naruto beamed at the positive response, supposing he must have done something right. And to him, that was all that really mattered right now.